And we are live. So, what's up, guys? We're back with another episode of Civil Offense. So today we're gonna, well, first of all, Civil Offense. My name's Ahmed Mlih, as always, and today we're gonna be doing what I consider to be a long-awaited stream, reacting to Ancom content. We'll be talking a lot about Mr. Polygamy is so cool that everyone's wife should sleep with a big black man, or your classist himself, Anark. But yeah, no, we're gonna be looking at a video where he's given his reasoning against voting. We're not gonna talk about the polygamy stuff, even though even James likes to talk about it. Friendly reminder: monogamy is rooted in bourgeoisie property norms. Share your wife with the nearest black man. Yes, he even got it before I was able to say it. Let's go live on Instagram as well here real quick, because apparently X doesn't let you stream now unless you are a premium member. So now I will be doing Instagram rather than X as my my other channel for streaming on. We got Itsiguala in here. What's up, man? Been seeing more of you in the server. That's awesome. So yeah, but we will be talking about his video regarding voting. He responded to ContraPoints, who is another leftist YouTuber. I assume these two are what, the BreadTube space, as they call it.
Yeah, they're basically in the BreadTube space, but I mean, I would argue that most of because again, the term BreadTube is based off their Kropotkin book, The Conquest of Bread. I'll just say this: I think Kropotkin would roll in his grave seeing basically all of the self-proclaimed BreadTube channels and even the self-proclaimed Ancom channels basically just being like discount Marxists, essentially.
Yeah, the bread tube, they call them. They want bread, but they keep voting Democrat. And even when they say they don't want to vote Democrat, they still support it, as we'll see. Because I honestly, I was watching that video and it didn't really seem to me like he's completely against voting. Just he himself was like, oh, well, there's some points to not doing it. But we'll get more into that, okay? I'm here with Ancat, the man who is the Hugh Jackman of the Civil Offense cinematic universe. Even when you think he's gone for good, he comes back for another film. What's up, man?
Not much. I always come back. It's William Afton for Five Nights at Freddy's. I always return.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, we got our announcements in here. I guess you can still go to my website, ahmedmlih.com, sign up for my email list for the latest updates. Though I still, every time I say it, I'm like, oh, I need to get back on that. I've still been slacking. You know what? I'm going to send one after this stream saying like, hey guys, keep up with the latest episodes. I don't know. But if you really want the latest updates, I'm always putting them on the Discord. So DM me at anarcho-nitrain. That's NIGHTRAIN. If you would like to join the if you would like to join the Civil Offense Discord server, I do actually post the actual updates in there because I am always talking about when I will be next streaming. I give usually a day in advance, almost always. I can't really remember the last time I didn't do that. I'm so good at updating. I mean, I'm giving at least a day's notice.
I give the best updates.
Okay. Yeah, I give the best updates known to man. But I actually do also day of give an advance a few hours before, saying exactly what the stream is, what we'll be talking about, usually at least an hour before, at the latest an hour before. And I give one when we start streaming. So I do give all the updates in there. If you don't want to miss a stream, come in. This is Five Nights at Ahmed's.
Real.
Anyway, yeah, I guess just check out Civil Offense on Rumble, Amazon, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts. I will be uploading this episode. I was also slacking on the last episode. I've just been out of it a little bit, but I will have this episode up on all streaming services within 24 hours. I promise you that, viewers. Yeah, I don't know. Anything you want to talk about before we start today, Ancat? Because you're the one that actually had brought up this topic to me, and you're like, you were the one that was wanting to talk about it. My source of inspiration here himself. We need to hear some words from him.
Sure. So, I mean, I first saw this video once it got uploaded because I think I'm still subscribed to him just because I'm interested in seeing his content. For anyone who doesn't know, though, Anark is basically like one of the more popular, like self-professed Ancom YouTubers. Although I don't think he explicitly I don't know exactly if he explicitly identifies as an Ancom or just anarchist without adjectives, but I'm pretty sure he said like some positive things about communism and stuff, which is, kind of cringy, but like I think he makes somewhat decent content. Just the problem is that because he's an ANCOM, he has a variety of issues that we as sort of Austro libertarians have pointed out repeatedly, but I figured would be a good place to sort of address here. Um, I think the best thing that ANCOMs typically are good at is their anti-politics, which they, emphasize heavily in their content, Anark being no exception. But while watching this video, critiquing ContraPoints and her sort of pro-voting, pro-Democrat Party shill type like rhetoric, I found that his response in critiquing politics could be better. I thought that there were some good points, which, we'll be going over in a moment, but I thought that there was a lot that we could address here. And especially given that we haven't really talked about this subject together in how long has it been now? Like at least half a year, right?
Yeah, I
Since
need
we
to
like dedicated a
yeah,
stream to it,
because we used to talk about it a lot. That was our main thing back in the day. We even had Esso on for a lot of those streams. And what did we talk about? Like the last one must have been I don't
think it
know,
was
because
like
I remember
Tucker
the
Carlson or
Javier Milei debate between
oh
Ignis and
yeah,
Filthy, but that one more so
yeah, that was terrible.
yeah. I was gonna try and phrase it a
I
little
feel bad
lightly,
for
but
Ignis.
yeah.
Like, no offense, Filthy, but like, I don't know. I think you need to, if you're watching the stream, you need to do a better job at enunciating your points because, like, you obviously don't believe that contradictions are true, but like saying it in the way that you are is without actually elaborating in depth is going to give people the wrong impression.
So some of the better ones from the past that we had done, we had the State Media Vivek 2024 and Gay Obama. That one
Oh,
was
that
part
was
of the joke
great.
title. That was a good episode overall. Yeah. I would suggest that one. Also we had the Is Tucker Carlson propaganda with Esso. Yeah, that one was good too. I think somewhat on the topic of what we're talking about, honestly, just talking about propaganda, I think was really important. But those we haven't done in like 10 or 11 months. It's been a
Wow,
while.
yeah.
Yeah. It's been some time. So we're back finally.
Well,
this
see,
year.
now we can start responding to because we haven't really responded to like a lot of leftist content. We've mainly been like criticizing, if anything, the a lot of the tendencies within our camp of the libertarian movement. So
We're the one. We are collectively the one true libertarian.
real.
So we have James here saying, "Can Anark be a little pilled?"
Probably not, because what's funny is I remember this was like 6 months ago. I made a comment on his stream and basically was like, hey, if you're interested in criticisms of politics, here are some people you should check out. And I recommended both Alul and Konkin's work. He said to Alul's work, he responded to Alul's work, which basically was just like, well, I've looked into anarcho-primitivism and, I think I've read some of his stuff and I kind of like it, I guess. And then his response to Konkin was somehow even worse, where he basically said that he was too close to the ANCAPs and therefore he was a capitalist shill and so therefore he's not worth looking into or whatever. And I just kind of rolled my eyes. Honestly, the other thing too, I also recommended him looking into the Austrian school, and his response was actually even worse than the Konkin one because he basically said that, well, the Austrian school is an ideology that basically is just designed to shill for capitalism, which
Didn't he say something about Mises specifically?
I think one of his I think one of his like commenters during the live stream basically pulled out the Mises was a fascist talking point, which is just it's honestly it's so absurd that it's honestly just I don't even how I don't even know how you can address that with like any degree of seriousness. It's honestly like just on the level of who would build the roads as far as just like thought terminating cliche arguments,
Yeah. So I wanted to point out with the thumbnail. I don't know if you guys caught this, but yeah. I don't know if you guys caught this, but I had done the let me pull up the reference here that I used for it. You can see I have a never boot like printed on my shirt, not really, but and then I have that rifle, but this is the image I pulled inspiration from. for the thumbnail. I really love this image. This is a great image to me. To replace goon with voot just felt really good to me. Never
That's
voot.
great.
We should make that as a shirt. Honestly, never voot.
True. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
a
like
good
replace
idea.
this with the shirt.
Good
That's a
idea.
great idea. Never goon. Okay. Gooning is
The
harmful.
rifle. Real. And we need like the same font too
Yeah.
to make it
I
accurate.
will save that just for later. But yeah, so we have Anark's video. Was there anything else you wanted to mention before we took a look at that?
Honestly, I don't think so, other than just kind of the fact that he responds to ContraPoints. I do think that we can skip kind of the intro.
Mm-hmm.
The timestamp that I put here was 154. Because again, he kind of has a tendency. Also, I will mention one other thing real quick is that he does have a bit of a tendency to kind of ramble, and this is kind of the like the sort of tendency within leftist circles. The shortest leftist meme. Where it's just a wall of text. I mean, that really is most left wing videos. He's a bit better than people like ContraPoints or Philosophy Tube, but like they're the absolute worst. I'm trying to think of other left tubers who are kind of in a similar vein. Um, oh yeah, H Bomber guy. He's really terrible. I really hate his style of video editing. Again, honestly, what's sad about a lot of like BreadTube content is that they actually make some decent points in their videos. The problem is just that yeah, the problem is just that they could very easily shorten a lot of what they have to say. Instead of making it a literal 3-hour video, which a lot of their content is. There was also one like funny comment made by Big Joel, who's kind of in that circle as well, but he tends to do a lot of a better job at condensing down his points. But he was just like, so I can make this point, either in the short way or in a longer way that explains the point but worse, So it kind of it kind of just demonstrates the kind of epitome of BreadTube and their style of content.
All right. And let's pull it up then. Let's take a look. So you said skip to the minute mark or minute 50?
I would just say like minute 40 maybe would be good.
40.
Know these arguments really well, so I have no intention to straw man either Natalie or anyone else that thinks that voting and electoral politics are really important. However, I have strayed away from that position for a reason, and I intend to lay out in this video why I do not any longer hold that position. So I'm not going to make you wait any longer. Let's just read through those.
He even acknowledges it. He's like, I'm not going to make you wait.
Right.
Tweets that Natalie made. So on July 3rd, Natalie said, "It's really easy to caricature the anti-electoralist left as online misanthropes whose politics is firebomb a Walmart and then not firebombing a Walmart. It would help to dispel that myth if they were more vocal about what specifically their methods have achieved. We're all frustrated that the Democrats aren't stronger, more effective, further left, savvier about strategy. But the Democrats can at least point to some significant accomplishments in the last 4 years. A major climate bill, infrastructure investment, nominating Justice Jackson. What has the anti-electoralist
Okay,
left
so we can actually pause
accomplished?"
it there because I do want to address like her tweets directly, which
This
he
is getting
actually
meta.
well he kind of doesn't in the video, which is a little annoying. He kind of just goes on a different tangent, but just her point about I think that one of the biggest problems with that tweet by ContraPoints is that firstly that somehow these statist policy prescriptions are accomplishments through the eyes of the left, and I know she's not an anarchist, but Anark will.
What is she?
She's just a Marxist, basically, like state socialist.
Oh, but Marxists think that anarchism is going to happen after communism.
Yeah, like that really is like the funniest meme within leftist circles. I'm actually an anarchist because within the material dialectic, it eventually will end with the state, with or without a state. That's It's the argument. It's just so utterly ridiculous, and it is kind of crazy that a lot of even like ANCOMs will have that view. They'll be like, well, look, as a means to achieve this stateless society, we need to have the state impose all these regulatory burdens and centrally plan the entire economy. But I said that eventually I don't want one. So that technically makes me a libertarian. Checkpoint rightists. And it's just like, what's funny too is that they advocate, like, the earlier leftists, they advocated something called, means ends consistency, which was sort of their entire criticism of Marxism as a movement, which was that you can't just say, I want this end of something, and then not in your means be consistent. Because, Marx said that his end was peaceful. His end was, voluntary cooperation without a central authority, but his means were, using the state as a vehicle to crush, class enemies. So,
we just need a bigger central authority to therefore not have a central authority.
Real, as Essa used to say, only central planning can create anarchy. But anyway, just to respond to her tweets directly, I think it is funny that, and Anark also will sort of go on to kind of praise these as accomplishments. But it is funny that within the like left anarchist movement is that state intervention is literally just automatically seen as getting closer to freedom. Even if you don't support politics, you still see the state prescribing these policies as somehow winning or an accomplishment. One of the examples that Natalie provided was the climate bill. Putting the state putting price ceilings on pharmaceuticals, continuing the expansion of Obamacare. I think in that climate bill, actually, there was literally one of the main things within the climate bill that she cites as like a leftist accomplishment was increasing funding for like over 80,000 IRS agents. And providing increased and providing like increased tax
they're going for the rich people, okay?
Real, yeah.
They're not coming for anybody else. We all know that the state goes for the rich people.
Look, the state's fine as long as it taxes the rich people. That's what anarchy is. Which is so funny because like Kropotkin himself, he literally argued that like the workers should dispossess the bosses, like they should organize militarily and basically form a coup at the workplace and democratically run it. But like even he who held those views literally did not argue in favor of like taxing rich people. He didn't favor state progressive income taxes. He didn't favor these state programs. Like, so it is funny that like modern day quote unquote ANCOMs will argue in favor of these things when even earlier ANCOMs didn't argue this.
What you're not thinking about is that the state needs the money in order to enact our plan.
Have they ever even like thought about like what if the state just uses that money to fund more wars?
But
like what if they just
we're giving but we assign that money for other stuff when we voted for our politicians.
Right. Yeah,
we told them them not to use the money for that, okay?
Yeah, and this is like another problem too. This is completely unrelated, but like Anark in one of his other videos, I think he literally argued that well, corporations, you don't have any representation, but at least with the state, you can have some kind of representation. And it's just like, I'm just here sitting there pulling my hair out, and he's, literally an anarchist saying that you can have representation through the government. Or that the government...
I mean, look, we told them, hey, war's bad. We're using the money for whatever, these healthcare plans or something. You guys have to do it. We told you to. We put it on a piece of paper.
Look, I mean, all that money is at least better in the state's hands than these corporations. At least the state has that money instead of those evil capitalist shills. Which also, like, to clarify, like, we're not even arguing that, like, there aren't problems with these monopoly firms, that they don't have issues because the state gives them all this power. But I think it really is funny that you'll turn around and defend the state in order to criticize them. I think that's just such a weird way from an anarchist perspective to, criticize these corporations.
Yeah, and I mean they come at it from the perspective of like, hey, these capitalists acquired their money, and that's how they funded the state in order to uphold capitalism to oppress people. It's kind of a weird logic there. It's like, well, okay, so how exactly did they get the money to then fund the state? How did they create capitalism without the state, and now the state's actually holding up capitalism? There's like a lot of different things where like their sort of narrative just doesn't compute. Even not just looking at it from the fact of like the state is the thing that is being used to control society.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think one of the main arguments that even Kropotkin used as to why he didn't favor, the government taxing the rich, in addition to the point where, the state is actually just holding on to the money. They're a criminal organization holding on to that money. They're not going to spend it very, benevolently. One of his main criticisms was that, if workers are contributing to that money through their labor, the state actually taxing that income is still stealing from the workers at large, money that actually belongs to them, not the state. So, like even from an LTV perspective, a progressive income tax is retarded.
Okay, let's take a look at some comments here. What is happening here? We suspect automated behavior on your account. It's Instagram. Apparently I can't stream to Instagram through the streaming process. Apparently that's not, I don't know. That was odd.
You know too much.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That was probably it. They don't want us talking about this. Let's see. So I'm still annoyed that Biden dropped out. This is from Filthy. What's up, Filthy? The real-time cognitive decline of someone I don't need to feel guilty about mocking was a tremendous loss for my future entertainment. True. Let's see. Yeah, let's savor these last months with our old man. Yeah, I mean, honestly, right? We got Ignis in here. What's up, man? Yo, forgot I'm in a different time zone. We'll be catching with the stream. All right. We got James saying this is an issue with. I need to like get above this chat. Like it's like taller, so I have to come up here. This is an issue with many self-proclaimed anarchists where they emphasize a particular group of people over the state, whether it be the rich, some ethnic group, or whoever.
Yeah, no, it's 100% true, and and we pointed out the problem with like right-wing reactionaries and their kind of issue of oftentimes, blaming the Jews, or the deep state or their neighbors. I mean, you had that Stefan Kinsella tweet that was really terrible. Do you remember that, where he was like,
yeah, where he was saying blame your neighbors because they're the ones that vote the politicians in.
He was saying like, well, don't blame the police. They're the one just enforcing the law. Don't enforce the lawmakers. They're just the ones that are writing it or whatever. Blame your neighbors who voted it in, because if they didn't vote those policies in, then they would have never written up those laws. And if they wouldn't have written up those laws, the police wouldn't have beaten you up.
This is just literal like Republican thinking. I mean,
it's just your brain on hoppyism, basically.
Yeah. But there's no difference between that and any other person that's like MAGA or the leftists, like where they're like, oh yeah, it's actually these people's fault and we have to like go after these people because they're the ones that are oppressing us through the government. If the left didn't have control, or if MAGA didn't have control, we'd be all right. We'd have what we want.
Yeah, this is why you see people like Bosch, being like, well, they should have just mown down the entire January 6th rioters, because it would have been a fascist upheaval of the government. I mean, even getting aside the retarded idea that it was an insurrection, like even if it was, the notion that you, as someone who is supposedly a libertarian or doesn't think the state has a legitimate claim to its property titles, you should be celebrating if you see people disregarding it and subverting it. But no, because it will be a right-wing coup, then we have to preemptively use the state, and cops are good as long as they're killing right-wingers.
Okay, James saying it makes it seem as if the state can be fixed from within by removing some aspect rather than the whole thing altogether. And yeah, we'll be discussing that some more. So we have Filthy Heretic saying, eat the rich, candidates keep getting voted in, and yet big corporations continue to exploit workers and consumers almost as if the state's decision-making is technical rather than ideological.
Look, Heretic, my claims are non-falsifiable because actually it's literally just because AOC isn't working hard enough. It's because all the right wingers within government are are keeping her from enacting the Green New Deal. All right.
And then he says, blame your neighbors because people who have been brought up their entire lives being propagandized, their only means of changing their environment is by voting. It's their fault, not the molesters.
Yeah, I mean, and that is basically what he's saying. He's literally saying, don't blame the state, blame the people being oppressed by the state because they think differently than you. I mean,
Yeah.
also getting aside from the fact that, you know, government agents also like have different ideologies than libertarians. It's just ridiculous from like every angle you look at it, and it's why I've been just so endlessly critical of these people, because I think that their rhetoric is very harmful, and this is why it's leading libertarians back to pro-state conclusions like fucking like Sal the quote unquote agorist straight up saying, oh well the communists are getting what they deserve in Argentina. You know, like it's so ridiculous.
Yeah. What happened to him being like against even libertarian politicians, where he was saying like, because he actually had tweets before where he would put up like NPCs like voting like, let's say Republican, Democrat, and then like a third one libertarian. It's like, yeah, I just don't like, I forgot what the actual quote from them was, but I guess it's just like highlighting people that want to control your lives. And I mean, I guess, you know, that's the whole kind of like, oh, well, the voters are the ones doing it. But I mean, the sort of idea there being that, I mean, people who are political and say they want certain things, like in a sense, they've been sort of propagandized to believe that they should be controlling people's lives. You know, it's not their fault that they're, you know, this way necessarily, but it's still like, I get the idea of what he was saying, where Republican, Democrat, and Libertarian Party are a problem in that same sense. He had a tweet like that, and now he's like simping for Mlih. Now he's saying like, oh, well, it's actually a good thing that these things are happening through the government, like that they're doing it to this thing to these people. So apparently he's actually not consistent when it comes to which party he's going to rail against.
Yeah, for sure.
Or I guess I should say like being against all parties. But yeah, let's get back to this because we're pretty early in and we haven't really gotten to like Anark's part of it yet. We're more so looking at him talking about ContraPoints.
Right.
In the same time frame. I remember in 2020, a lot of mutual aid funds going around for protesters and people hit by the pandemic. That counts as an achievement. What else? Anything on the level of influence as a major climate bill? As someone terrified by the prospect of Trump returning to power.
Is it like, is he going to come back on? Okay. He was just talking over the tweet. I was like unsure if it was going to, I guess it's still Natalie's tweet.
Reassure me that there's a plausible direct action / non-electoralist means of stopping him that's more likely to succeed than electing Biden / Harris? Because if not, I think you're a LARPer. So it's pretty obvious why a lot of people responded negatively to this, right? Even if these arguments make a lot of sense, the language that Natalie is using here is kind of incendiary. It's certain to get people angry. However, before I respond to those tweets directly, what I'd like to do is lay out exactly what the anti-electoralist position actually is. I feel like up front, what I should mention is that anti-electoralism is not the same as abstaining from voting or advocating that other people abstain from voting. It's not that simple.
Okay, Vsauce.
Don't get me wrong, there have been a lot of historical radicals who definitely do advocate that we abstain from voting, and I am quite certain that Natalie has interacted with a lot of far leftists in the modern day who are saying much the same thing. But I just want to make clear that that is not the totality of the anti-electoralist position, nor is it even really an important part of the argument. I say all of this because that's not my position. I don't really care whether you vote one way or the other, and we're going to get into why, but I just want to put that out there before we continue, because I know that a lot of people who are watching this video, that's probably their main sticking point. It's so important in their minds that if I don't say that up front, you may not even watch the rest of the video to understand the position it is that I'm going to try to present here. So the anti-electoralist position generally is comprised of two key factors. The first is that voting is largely a distraction. It's something that makes us feel like we have a lot of power. It presents itself as being very important, but in the larger schema, actually doesn't do very much. And there are a lot of technical reasons why that's the case, especially in a place like the United States. I could get into all of those fiddly technical distinctions about the electoral college and first past the post systems and so on.
Yeah, but why do those actually matter? Why do those make any difference? He's implying here that the problem is more specifically within the United States, because what the state says the election process actually is, and he's clinging on to the notion that the outcome actually does matter, and thus a group or party wants to keep running things that way.
Yeah, I mean, you could just respond to this by saying, okay, well, why can't we just fix the electoral college? Like, what about other countries who don't have the electoral college? I mean, aren't they representative? You could say that.
Yeah, I mean, it's like at this point, it's like, oh, well, the Republicans are holding things back because the electoral college is still in place. So why exactly is it that, if this is your mindset, that you wouldn't vote Democrat to get rid of the electoral college? I mean, he brings up some points later on in this that we can sort of like connect to why maybe this is his own internal narrative. But even with that being the case, my main point here is going to be that it just still nullifies his whole reasoning behind why he thinks voting is purposeless. So even from the perspective of him being like, I don't vote, we're like, that's good. But then, it almost comes to the point where it's like, okay, but why aren't you voting? In the sense of like, what exactly is your reasoning against it? It doesn't seem to make sense.
Right. And the other thing too, oh yeah, this is a little bit unrelated, but if you want, I didn't have anything to say to your response because I thought that was great. But if you want, it might be better to put it on 1.25 or 1.5 speed if you want. Just because he does tend to ramble a bit, so
we'll put it on 1.25 first. I was thinking of doing that too, before I had started the stream, but then I was like, maybe if somebody wants to turn this stream on afterward when they're actually watching it back, if we're talking a little slow, if they want to speed it up, then it's going to kind of speed him up a lot. But
right.
I don't know, because some people like watching things like that. I don't know if we talk slow like most other people. Usually when I'm listening to a stream, sometimes I might turn it up as far as speed. But yeah, I don't know. We could try 1.25, if not probably 1.5. I get why you're saying that, because I mean, yeah, it can kind of get long without that being the case.
The other thing too is I do have points where he kind of goes off on a tangent, and I have timestamps for where we can skip ahead to skip some of these sections.
But I just would like to lay this out in its totality. So let's continue on to point 2. Point 2 is actually the more important of the two aspects in my mind, and that is a belief that all of our energy, all of the efforts that we spend into electoralism, into participating in people's electoral campaigns, into canvassing, into phone banking, into arguing with people about who should or should not be elected, these are an enormous waste of our energies.
And I actually agree with what he was saying there, because the state is trying to get people not only to think that the political process is a valid method of producing better outcomes, but that it's the only valid method. So, they want people to invest time into it and resources, as opposed to thinking about what can be done outside of it through counter economic actions. I do find it a little bit odd that he uses the term energies as opposed to energy. I noted that because it's like, it sounds like he's talking about chakras, or he's referring to a they, them.
Right. And this is actually like one of the great points that, me and you for the past couple of years have really been trying to hit home, is that like focusing on electoralism essentially distracts libertarians from, actually keeping a consistent movement, and, oftentimes even criticizing the state. So, whether or not we're hyper focusing on, whether or not Trump said a bad thing today, or some crazy shit that the left did this week. That's taking way less attention from pointing out, hey, what did the CIA do this week? Or what about the war in Yemen that's continuing to rage on today? It drives people so down, the politics rabbit hole, and gets people into a mentality that the left or the right or ex-president or ex-party is the true enemy, and they forget that the state is the one who's sort of the true enemy. And this is why I think that so many people who become reactionaries and delve this heavily into the culture war, eventually just straight up abandon libertarianism altogether. I mean, we've seen it with, I don't want to call it Mentis directly, but and I don't know that this is the reason why he's kind of shilling for Israel, but it's Mentis' wave on Israel, for instance. He's delved away into the culture war to the point where he's not even really talking about criticisms of the government. It's always, criticisms of the cathedral, or trying to play defense for Trump as some subversive to the elite, or talking about the left and the woke lits. That's the real problem. It's the wokes who are really your enemy. It's like, and again, like, I'm not even saying you can't criticize like woke shit, but I just think it's kind of weird that you're focusing on that way more than actually, criticizing the state. But we've also seen that with, that guy T, or like Stefan Molyneux, Richard Spencer, Freedom Tunes. These all used to be like full on anarchists, but they totally moved away from it because they either focused on, white nationalism or leaned too heavily into the culture war. But, and there are plenty of others, but like what I've noticed is that almost every time that they do this, they abandon libertarianism. Like every time.
So we have Filthy Heretic saying, imagine how many 3D printed wind farms or hydroponic farms could be made with 1/100th of the resources spent in elections, but selections in parentheses. And then we have James Liberated saying, this is why I've become so obsessed with a little sociology. I think that politicization is the biggest threat to the libertarian movement. He said, I tried to defend Mentis Wave for a bit, but I gave up on that not too long ago for various reasons, and they all trace back to politicization. And then we have, let's see, we have Jack Reeder saying, hey, I really like the stream. Granted, I do disagree on the culture war part. Culture is a great way to rally behind, and nationalism is something that will always exist as long as ethnicity exists.
Oh God, is this a white nationalist in the stream?
Let me see.
Pull up the chat again, because I think, because
I was going to read his other chat before pulling it up.
Well, I was just going to say he's literally saying nationalism is something that will always exist as long as ethnicity exists. Ethnicity and nationality aren't inherently tied. Like, this is kind of the problem with
other chat, and it's not all a bad thing. However, I agree the paradigm needs to shift from mainstream culture war into national liberation / left nationalism.
Left nationalism. I don't know. Maybe they're a leftist. I don't know. I don't know what their positions are, because I've seen that same talking point from like white nationalists who, well, because they're like their main.
He does also mention like as long as ethnicity exists, but then he mentions left nationalism. Is he like a national socialist?
Hopefully not.
Well, in the sense of, I guess like let's see. Oh, he says he's a Jewish nationalist.
I'm not okay. It seems like they're just trolling.
I don't know. This seems like too many things.
It seems like just
seems like too many things from one thing or another.
I'm not like trying to make fun of you or anything, but it's just like it.
I'm actually a post-left anarcho-monarchist.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, we can talk about nationalism at some point, but yeah, I don't like that is kind of the white. For anyone who doesn't know, that is like the common white nationalist talk. Like if you hear someone saying like, oh well nationalism and race are the kind of the same thing, or like I don't even need to call myself a white nationalist because a nationalist implies the race. That's not true. Even if I am critical of like nationalism in general, I don't think that that's an accurate statement.
Oh, okay. So he's clarifying his position here. He says, I am a Jewish anarchist / mutualist, and no, I am not a Zionist at all.
Okay.
This is interesting. Like, I mean, I didn't know what to think of what you thought, because it's like it seems like a lot of things coming at us at once.
Yeah.
But
well, hey, welcome to the stream.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad you like the show. I'm wondering like what exactly like this has to do. Well, I guess just asking for clarification on the part about like nationalism and ethnicity. And I guess like, is ethno-nationalism like a thing that I don't even know how to phrase the question. I'm just trying to wonder like how that has to do with like anarchism and mutualism.
Well, I'm just like wondering, like I'm not even I'm not even saying that you as a libertarian can't touch upon culture, but I don't like the people who make that the entire focus of their content and put libertarianism in the background. That's one of the main things that I've been critical of. And
well, I'm just, like my thing here is more so that the ethno-nationalism, or I guess, it would kind of, the ethnicity and nationalism kind of implies ethno-nationalism, which sounds more like an ethno-state kind of thing. So I'm kind of wondering, it's like, okay, well, you're an anarchist, but also advocating for an ethno-state. Am I getting this right?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, we can continue responding and then kind of respond to the chat later.
Yeah, that was just my thing as far as figuring out clarification for it.
Right.
But yeah, let's get back to the Anark video. Apparently James remembers him from Zulu server.
These are a distraction from much more important issues that we need to be engaged in. I once held this pro-electoralist position, so I know what you're saying in response now.
Why is it that when you tell people on the left to vote, they think you're saying quit your job, abandon your family, retreat from society, and fall into a deep slumber from which you emerge once every 4 years to vote for a shitty lib before fleeing into the forest and re-entering a ritual slumber on a stone slab in an eldritch temple awaiting the return of Beelzebub?
Also, ContraPoints annoys me.
Yeah, no, I've said this repeatedly, but yeah, I really don't like ContraPoints. It's honestly like it's just the style of her presentation. It's just really fucking annoying to me.
Yeah.
You can vote and do other things also.
This is an argument I used to make a lot. I really thought that this was the key argument that sort of dismantled the anti-electoralist.
Oh, here, wait, you can pause it.
However,
I did want to point to her argument, which was, okay, well, why don't you just come out every 4 years and, vote or whatever? But, like we pointed out, is that the position is that, you also have to actually argue that the position that voting actually doesn't matter. So the notion that, well, like the anti-electoralist position isn't just, okay, well, we can just vote every, don't vote every 4 years. It's also holding the argument that it actually doesn't matter. So you can't be like, oh, well, I'm anti-electoralist except every 4 years and I'll vote. Like the argument ultimately is that democracy is effectively a scam. And, the people who aren't anti-electoralists, who believe that you can control what the state does, control government policy by choosing which people are in power or holding keys to the kingdom, is just wrong.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Anark on the fact that, like, it's, going back to his point of, it's not just an every 4 years thing. Like, there are other aspects of it that you're expected to be roped into, or that you just will be by nature of being invested in it. I mean, a lot of people that are deciding who to vote for, they're watching the debates, and not just shitting on them. They're watching them actually trying to expect to learn something from these people. And coming at it from the perspective of like, well, I want to make an informed decision. I want to make sure that I'm having the right conversations to learn more about this. They want to engage with people, not for the purpose of trying to figure out what action to take, but actually just, what name to put on that ballot, what person to focus on, what political sort of like, strongman to rally behind. And so there's, even outside of that, there's just so many more things that you're finding yourself invested in when you start taking it seriously, to the point where, just saying like, okay, well, you can just go in and vote every 4 years is not actually something realistic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
I definitely don't think that anymore.
Oh, you had something else?
Oh, I was just going to say that I was done.
Oh, okay.
And the reason is because we actually have limited energies. And while it's true that if all people did was vote and maybe spent a little while, just a few hours or a day on voting, it wouldn't be a huge deal. It's not accurate to say.
I think it wouldn't be a huge deal to try and get people, like, I mean, for the most part, like being worried about people being at all invested if that was the only investment necessarily. And if that really was what the investment was, then who really cares? I mean, still, you can make the case that like, well, there's still a problem as far as it seeming like it adds legitimacy to the state to have so many people in numbers voting, because even like wasn't it like twice over, I don't know if it was twice over or if it was just in 2020 that it was like more people than ever were voting for candidates and stuff like that. I don't know if it was Biden had received the most votes for a president in like US history or something along those lines, that like more and more people are actually getting, and I know population has changed, but the point being is that I guess like they're trying to make the case that there's like more more activity, more focus on politics and such, and that itself is a problem. And the idea that, you know, it makes the state look more legitimate to the people that are engaged in politics is a problem.
Yeah, for sure.
That most people who are engaging their minds on the topic only spend that amount of energy on electoral politics. Quite the opposite, in fact. When elections come around, they tend to subsume all other kinds of discussions. Everything becomes about the election. Everything becomes a discussion about different people we could vote for, about the strengths and weaknesses of different candidates. And furthermore, shaming people for not voting, or really spending a lot of time even encouraging people to go out there and vote. That may seem...
Yeah, I mean, just a quick point. It's like, I remember, and this is just really just on the shaming people for not voting part. I remember in 2020, there were like people posting about, oh, well, you know, people can't find who you voted for, but they can see whether you voted or not. So make sure that when people are looking you up, that it shows up that you voted. I was seeing people unironically post this that have no stake in this as far as like, you know, being the ones to be the political canvassers and such. Just people on social media posting this for their friends to see. It's like, I can see that you didn't vote. And are they really going to look you up? Probably not. But, you know, they want you to feel like you're being watched and like your actions are actually being, you know, seen by others. And so they're like, well, you better vote. You know, it doesn't matter for who, even though, you know, well, I mean, at the same time, they do want you to vote for their preferred candidate. But regardless, they place this high importance on voting and like actually, you know, like getting out there and doing it. They're like, yeah, you have to be doing this. It's your civic duty. It's your responsibility. You know, it's on you to be doing this. Like you should be glad that you're able to vote. You should be glad that you're not in a country where they stop this from happening. Like you get to participate in the process.
Yeah, I mean, and this is also seen in sort of the people who are just unironically saying, well, it doesn't matter who you vote for, just vote. You know, it doesn't matter who it is, just vote. Well, if it doesn't matter who it is that you vote for, then why are you so insistent that I vote? Unless you just want me voting for the sake of voting, in which case that kind of makes our point that, you know, maybe your motives are ulterior here.
Like it's sort of anodyne and unimportant, but all of those things take mental energy. That is mental and physical energy that you could be spending on other things. And I found that in a general sense, people spend less energy on bottom-up organizing in measure to the amount of energy that they are spending on elections. And that includes all those things that I mentioned a few moments ago, not just going and voting. That's the least of anybody's concerns here. It's all that time that you spend thinking about, discussing, worrying about the election. More than that, a lot of people then go further and canvass for different politicians and phone bank for them, as I said earlier. And those things are a much larger expenditure of energy. Whatever amount of energy you are devoting to that, you're not devoting.
You know, or in the case of the left, just literally living on Twitter. You know, and that's all I want to say.
To other things. In general, you'll find that people who hold this pro-electoralist position, they tend to not do much else. In fact, I think one of the biggest problems with this pro-electoralist position is it gives people the sensation that they've already done the most important thing that they can do, which is voting or supporting one of these candidates. I think it sort of...
Well, yeah, I mean, the purpose is to make people seem like this is like they're engaged in the legitimate process, the valid process, the process for doing anything. So, I mean, yeah, it's like it is meant to prevent people from looking for sort of like ulterior ways of, or I guess like going outside of the norms to sort of, I guess, like accomplish their or I guess have other means of accomplishing their ends, I should say.
Right.
Reassures them that they don't need to do all of the other stuff. In general, people whose minds revolve around electoral politics, they're not going out and building organizations. They're just posting memes on Facebook or angry rants, or at most maybe attending a protest.
He said all the other stuff as if voting is like part of it still. I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah.
I expect to vote for Biden and then protest the administration that I voted for.
But I'm advocating something a lot more than attending a protest.
We've been talking a lot about my plan, but what is your plan, Tabitha?
So, as she says, what is the plan? I mean, if you are anti-electoralist,
trust the plan.
Then what do you think you're going to do instead of voting for president or a senator or a congressman or something? So this is a good question. You know, what is the alternative if we're going to spend our time?
Oh, it's Congress Day, okay.
Trying to discourage people from spending all their energies on electoralism. Do we have any sort of suggestion for an alternative? Well, I have to admit that this was a big part of why I wanted to make this video. One thing that I notice about the way that Natalie engages with this topic is that she seems to think that there are only two approaches. Number one is reformism, and that is to say, working within the system, trying to carry out incremental improvements into our laws and to the people that are sitting in seats of power, or a violent coup, some sort of armed overthrow. And the latter position is the one she tends to ascribe to people who are anti-electoralist. And I understand why. I think a lot of the people that are probably in her comments are those exact sorts of people. And in this video, you might have seen sort of some short clips of this caricature of an anarchist who she's calling Tabby.
So you sit here vote shaming me, and in the next breath admitting it won't do anything? You're a
Here,
counter-revolutionary
just pause it
lib
on the
with no plan
fucking,
except
like-
just
It's weird for a while. It's so cursed with the red flag and the fucking.
It's got
black
that
flag as
same
well.
artist that is always doing these photos for people. Are people
Yeah,
recruiting
you
the same
have it-
artist, or is it just the same style?
I don't know.
What is
You
going
have-
on here? How do
you have
all of
the,
them have that same thing?
You have the black rose plus with the Soviet Union symbol plus next to the black flag. That's just so cursed. She they Cab 1312.
to vote. Tabby-chan, Tabby-chan. Look, I promise I'm not as dumb as I apparently look.
Bruh, the fucking I'm just looking at that like McDonald's coffee right there. Like the
Right.
iced coffee from McDonald's. Bruh, like, I'm not even making it from the perspective of like, oh, you're a communist, yet you're buying from the capitalist system. It's just more so like it looks like, I don't know, like this individual is trying to very much have that vibe of, I'm a girly girl. I get like these drinks from the like Starbucks or McDonald's or whatever that's in this like plastic cup. Well, shouldn't you, even if you're like anti sort of, capitalism, but you're still paying into the process or whatever, still you can avoid the plastic cup actually. If that aren't they all about it, like environmentalism and not wasting and all that,
I don't think it's bad per se to like, to a normal extent, like just kind of do your daily thing and like buy shit. Like if you're criticizing capitalism or whatever, like just doing regular shit and buying stuff, like I don't think that's really a problem. But I do notice that it like leftists often more times than even like right wingers will lean into it a lot more, even when they could very easily cut back on a lot of
That's my point with the plastic cup here. From notably with the straw, it looks like McDonald's or maybe something like that. Like, I mean, it seems like you're going out of your way to do it at this point. It's almost like you just want to fund it. Like,
right, exactly. Well, it's like I don't think it's contradictory. Where it's like, oh, like the conservatives will be like, oh, well, you criticize capitalism, yet you're holding an iPhone, like, checkmate liberal or whatever. Like, I think that's stupid, but I do think that you can make fun of them if they're like, okay, I'm going to buy the iPhone, all the new iPhone products, the Apple Watch, the AirPods, the
headset,
everything. Yeah. Like they buy
the Apple Vision
everything.
Pro.
Right.
See, now, if you have an Apple Vision Pro and you're a communist, I'm going to laugh at you because that one is just going like, you don't need that. Like,
right, exactly.
No one even needs that. I don't think anyone needs that.
Zulu, because there's that meme where it's like the yes, you live in society and you still criticize it, but meme. But he had a few that were really great responses to that, where it was like one of them was just like it was a slave owner, owning like this black slave or whatever, and he was like, slavery should be abolished, and the guy walking up to him was just like, what? And he was just like, yeah, I can still participate in society while criticizing it.
Okay,
see, now that's good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Comrade.
That seems to be the sort of people she is aiming this critique at. But
or wait, there was another one that was like it was because the original meme takes place in like the 1600s, where it was like feudal times, so where you literally didn't have a choice. But there was a guy that was like, there was a chick in the cartoon like holding an iPhone, being like, wow, and looking at that peasant over there who's like carrying the weed on his back, and is like, wow, that guy's like literally me.
Third option. The third option is something called prefiguration, often referred to as a dual power strategy. And what I want to do here is lay out this dual power strategy. So the dual power strategy is about building alternative institutions in the here and now, outside of the prevailing power structures that exist. It's about creating the new in the shell of the old, as the IWW used to say. And I'll be a little more specific about what I mean. Prefiguration is about creating the sorts of entities we wish to see in the future world to the maximum degree possible within the world that we currently have. That includes things like cooperatives, time banks, mutual aid organizations, radical horizontal organizations, reading groups, free schools, and a variety of other sorts of things.
You can pause it.
The list is
just radical horizontal organizations. Like, I think he has gone into a bit more detail, but I don't know. I don't really like the whole well just they're radical and they're horizontal. Like,
Is that just
what
an
do you mean by
employee-owned
that?
company?
Yeah, I don't know. Like they always just say
Like
Like, here,
employee-owned
you'll-
companies exist. I don't see like.
he
I mean-
he uses. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, I'm not opposed to there being, the competing practices, but the problem is that I can't really imagine you building an institution under the norms established by the state that counters those norms without disobeying them, as in, like, not going through the government approval process.
Right, and that's kind of the other issues that it's a lot of times they will build these organizations, but then they will just kind of go through and get government approval, and then their organization collapses after they die, and we're kind of back at square one. I mean,
Mhm.
in the 19th century, you had probably 500 times more of an actual movement that he's talking about. Like, there were literally millions of workers who could protest in the 19th century and did. You could get out onto the street regularly and do this kind of stuff, but now for a variety of reasons that's not really possible anymore. And even then, their movements didn't really well. Okay, I don't want to say they accomplished nothing, but I think that the ultimate pillars of what's going to collapse violence is going to be a lot more nuanced than that. I'm not saying that their work didn't do anything, but I will say that I think that it's a work that eventually came to nothing because the state just pummeled over them anyway, and now these movements are dead. You know what I mean?
No, I'm saying, and the thing here is like you're creating an organization, but yeah, that organization is dependent on the existence of, this owner and I guess, owners, if you're going to put it in how they're framing it, I suppose. But anyway, the base of people that make it up, once that it goes, you sort of lose that. There's no advancement made. There's no sort of innovation that allows people to do this more easily. I mean, I guess aside from just making it a more standard practice, I suppose, but even so, it's unless you're doing it outside of the state's norms, you can't really make it that standard unless, that's how the government's organizing society. So, at this point you have the problem of, well, how did you get any closer to a society that is free of a state, right? How do you get any closer to that? You're essentially giving we've talked to Ignis and he's talked about how, passing laws sort of gives utility to people, essentially making their lives better, but not really coming any closer to ending the state. This is somewhat similar to that, where it's I'm sure, the best argument you can make for this is it maximizes the utility of these people working in that organization, but it doesn't really do anything as far as getting people any closer to the end goal of freedom.
And also the other thing too is that a lot of these can have the consequence of you basically sacrificing your entire life, and sacrificing a lot of time, energy, and money into things that are good, but are they really worth all these people doing all these things that are risky to what extent? And that's kind of the other thing as well that you have to take into consideration. But again, everything is kind of a trade-off. So I think the ultimate problem with these strategies is that, again, they don't really actually undermine these organizations that are instituting violence. They're really just, at most, like you said, improving the quality of life of the people that are currently living, which again isn't bad, but if you're talking about this as though it's not that, right? You're talking about this as though this is some revolutionary thing, when in reality it's not. Because I don't doubt that Anark is doing some currently, cool stuff, with trying to build some networks and stuff. But once he dies, and once everyone else in that commune or whatever, dies or whatever, like what's going to happen, right? Like this is kind of the same thing that happened with Konkin and the Anarcho village. Like the lasting legacy that Konkin left wasn't his counter economics, it was his contribution to libertarian philosophy. It wasn't the Anarcho village, because the Anarcho village was just some fucking like 10 or 12 people living in a like libertarian commune, and then they all died. Like, so again, it's not to like disparage their work, but like they sacrificed their whole lives for kind of nothing.
Right. So let's grab some chats here. Let's see. So we have oh wait, hold on. We have did we already read this one from Jack? He said, and no, not a troll, granted new viewer, I really like the stream. I think we might have read that one, but yeah, thank you. He said, oh, I agree, the entire thing shouldn't be the culture war, but very successful anarchist revolution or project has had a national basis. And then he says the CNTFAI was the liberation of Catalonia, Makhnovia with Ukraine, and even more libertarian socialist projects like Rojava, and the Zapatistas were also left nationalist.
Well, I don't know much about Rojava other than I'm pretty sure it has instituted like actual laws, like actual legislative fiat by the body. So this notion that there isn't some unilateral organization, I don't care if you call it a worker commune, I don't care if you call it a worker council, if there are people unilaterally declaring, even if it's collectively, even if it's a democracy, that are deciding how property is used by fiat, by legislation, as opposed to people actually individually acting upon those resources, then yeah, you don't have a libertarian society, you have a tyranny. I don't really care what you call it.
And then oh, you were going to say something else?
Oh, I was just going to say, as far as the CNT, I have a lot more to say about that. They murdered political or religious dissidents. There's a study, and I can link it in chat, that estimates over 8,000 of the 32,000 victims of the Spanish Red Terror were committed by the CNT, Revolutionary Catalonia. They famously executed and tortured priests. They burned churches, which, so much for non-aggression and property rights, right? Oh well, it wasn't the state. It was just a freedom anarchist militia. Like, they had central banking. They didn't allow people to leave. They literally forced people to work at gunpoint. They had the worker council literally had central management of all commerce, which again, like, if you have a council just declaring that the property should be managed this way, instead of, their claim is in a higher position than someone who, like, if I were to go out and like homestead a field, and then the collective, the anarchist collective, quote unquote, goes out and says, well, no, we actually have a higher claim to that field, even if they didn't act upon it, but we collectively own it together. That's an aggression, my dude.
Okay, so we have Filthy with the scorn of the politicized is the highest honor. And then, yeah, we had James saying Congress is them.
And again, and also just like, I did want to say, like, I'm not even trying to like make fun of you for defending these, or like, this is something that a lot of left anarchists fall into the rabbit hole of, is that they hear nice sounding words like, oh, it was horizontal, oh, it was democratically managed, like, oh, they all had a vote. Like, I think they get into a lot of these, look, they were wearing, this is the same thing that ANCAPs do, where it's like, oh, look, the tank was painted yellow, look, they were wearing red uniforms, and they were all wearing the black and red hats. Like,
it's the Democratic Republic, or People's Republic of Korea, okay?
Yeah, the horizontally managed, decentralized worker trade federation and narco liberation front, like, literally burning churches, and you're calling that anarchy. I think that's just kind of ridiculous.
Okay, so Filthy says it's a website that makes all those profile pics. I don't remember what it's called. That makes a lot more sense. They're probably just like putting it on an avatar, like just scrolling through hats and shit. Let's see, James Liberated. She should have just flexed a Stanley and it would have been better. Yeah, and also get lead poisoning.
And the other thing too that leads left libertarians into this kind of rabbit hole is that they think that when they're talking with people, they describe like anarchy or anarchism as, oh, well, it's a type of society. It's a state of being where we have to prescribe exactly what happens. And so then they ask, well, okay, well, where are some empirical examples of where this has happened? And you sort of kind of have to start constructing these real life examples and kind of grasping at straws, when in reality you should be pointing out that no, what we're advocating for is a philosophy that's anti-aggression and respecting the autonomy of individuals and property rights. And that's how we conclude that these organizations like the military, warlords, etc., aren't legitimate institutions and should be fought against in the same way that you would condemn any other criminal. That's really all it is. It's a philosophy that applies general morality to these institutions that are typically seen by the public as good.
Yeah, and I mean, there's that where you have people like trying to trap you into this sort of, I mean, it's very much so like a sort of like game of trying to get you to sort of accept politics by even if inadvertently by the person doing it, by saying like, oh, well, like, where have you seen this before? When has this been done? Where have we seen this, this system, they'll emphasize that part of it too. But you have like the Dr. Manhattan meme. I don't know if I can pull it up or not, but if I can find it, but it's like someone saying like, how would you plan out society, or how would you do X thing? And then it's like Dr. Manhattan blowing him up. Like he's like putting his hand at him and he's like, I don't have to. Or he's like, it's not up to me, something like that. And it's a very funny meme because it's like, yeah, I mean, that's it in reality, when you don't have a system, because, you don't have a form of government instituting anything, you have this, like, I guess just it all is a result of voluntary association. So, on a very small level, you don't have like a rule governing how one thing or the other works. Like you can understand what aggression is and what it isn't, but how people resolve disputes and such isn't like up to some force or some just system that tells you, okay, well, here's how you do it instead.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. So actually, I don't know if I finished all the chats. Let me see. Filthy saying constructing centralized organizations to compete with the white market doesn't actually subvert the state's organizational model. They'll either be co-opted or broken up by cops. Right. So yeah, if you do it under the legal system, then yeah, it's going to be something that isn't going to be subversive because, by very nature of it being something that's constructed under the regulations of the state, it's going to be within its norms. So it's going to be something that the state, again, can either co-opt. And if it isn't, if you do it outside of those norms, then yeah, it would be broken up by the state's armed guards. We have James saying, I also noticed springtime of nations make this error in associating regions with unilateral control as anarchist or libertarian. So like secession, or I think it's like what, panarchism?
Yeah, or because I know that the sort of Sneckway or SneckTube community did their whole like Anarchy and Reality series, but I haven't looked into them specifically, but I wouldn't be shocked if there are, some kinds of monopolies of arbitration or some kind of unilateral aggression occurring here. But we can talk about that another time probably.
This is really an issue in many anarchist circles. Okay, and then we have Jack Reader coming back saying, oh, I agree. They weren't perfect, but it's progress still. Well, we kind of sort of talked about why it wasn't really progress, but I mean, that's your opinion. Granted, as a Jewish person, I have an undying respect for Machno for defending my people and doing amazing things.
Well, here's the thing, is that I don't think that you can really call like, first of all, like I don't even think that when they say things like progress, you don't even get that take from a lot of these circles. You literally say that they were anarchist, and I think it's very important to point out that they weren't. If you have an organization that is literally murdering people at gunpoint and controlling the territory, that's not freedom. That's not something that you should be defending. You can point out to certain good things that maybe they weren't authoritarian in this area, like for instance, okay, hey, the United States, it isn't arresting me for, doing a Nazi dog meme, like Count Dankula or whatever. Like, okay, they're not doing that. That's great, but the other thing too that I would criticize as well is the notion that the state choosing to back off and stop, molesting you or whatever is somehow getting you.
It's a choice of words.
Is like, well, yeah, is somehow kind of something to be like to celebrate the state for, or
Yeah,
say, well, they're so benevolent. Like, look at them not doing these X, Y, and Z things, even though they probably have ulterior motives for it.
To get this across to Gen Z, yes, the state does molest you. If you do something that's illegal, the state says, "Oil up, boy."
Holy shit.
But
yeah, I mean, this is the problem where it's like, okay, like, to what point can you even compare this? Like, for instance, you see this exact same kind of argument occur in a lot of these tanky circles where they say stuff like, well, look, the Soviet Union didn't murder, 12 million people. They only murdered 8 million people. Isn't that an accomplishment? Like, they brought down their murder rate from like, like 100 million down to 50 million. And again, like, we're not saying that they should have killed more people or the murdering being brought down wasn't good, but like, why are you celebrating this government for doing that? What like you wouldn't apply this to like any other situation. Like, let's say you have like a murderer who's like the serial killer who is like, oh yeah, I'm gonna go kill 10 different people today, and then tomorrow they're like, you know what, I'm only feeling 5, and then you like start clapping for them, you start celebrating them, you start propping them up as this, oh, they're a libertarian now, like they're only killing 5. Like, that's basically what the ANCOM community are doing with stuff like the CNT. And again, the other thing too is like, again, how is it, in what way is it a step forward in the sense that they, the power vacuum that was, subverted when the revolution happened was taken over by another power vacuum? That's the very thing that we don't want to have happen. We don't want any kind of power vacuums. We don't want any aggression. We want to make sure that these types of organizations can't fill this power vacuum. So, I mean, from our perspective, that's not really getting you closer to freedom.
Yeah, we have Filthy saying, if political technique is required for their organizational models to be sustainable, the state, lowercase s, of freedom cannot emerge, which is how we know it wasn't anarchistic. And then he says, one does not murder thousands of people in self-defense. Yeah. You want to get back to the video, though?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. We're like, what, a third of the way through?
Is actually quite large. And if you want to know more about the sorts of things that I'm talking about here, you can go watch my video, Constructing the Revolution, which is built to be a sort of introduction to this topic of prefiguration or dual power building. And the thing is I think Natalie is sort of aware of this strategy, at least in the back of her mind, because here's her from the voting video talking about how capitalism prefigured itself in the 15 and 1600s.
Capitalism is an epical world economic order. When you say end capitalism, you're talking about a tectonic shift. It's just so annoying. That is so much bigger than all of us that I don't really understand the course of action you're recommending. Like, before capitalism, there was feudalism.
That's you can pause it real quick. That's genuinely how I feel like with these fucking leftist videos. With the. Richard Wolff, complaining about how the capitalists stole my foreskin or something.
Hey, unironically, that's what they do.
Real.
Yeah. How many communist circumcisions have you seen?
Real.
Well,
but honestly, like left.
We could ask Jack Reader.
Dialogue, it just annoys me so much.
Huh?
Just their buzzwords that they continually use, like I don't know, it's so annoying to me. After a while, that was like that. I sat through it the first time I was watching this, like writing some notes down, and I was just like, that's how I felt when I was doing it. But at least, right. Like it's like when you first get hit with that, it's like a train. It's like, what are you even saying at this point? You have
to have so much, like, I guess, foreknowledge of their terms. And I mean, obviously it's like, it's not like it's, complete gibberish. Like you can at least tell what is trying to be said, but it's the idea that, it's like, you just have, I guess, just so much like, I guess, context that you need as far as what they even mean, to be able to, like, sit through it without being like, what the hell are you saying?
Right. Did they put you to sleep though with a honk shoe or a
No, it was definitely
which kind of boredom were you
it was
experiencing?
definitely a honk shoe.
Okay, based.
Population and production, not because people just decided it was time to end feudalism. So won't capitalism end just whenever a new economic system overtakes it? I don't think that's the kind of thing that can be accomplished by a small group of activists. And I say small group because, I'm sorry to break it to you, but the vast majority of Americans are not communists.
I use this clip because I agree with Natalie that these tasks are enormous. That they
okay, but honestly, I have to go back to even understand that, because I was getting it at first, but then I literally just started like zoning out from it. And honestly, that oh, look at this face though. Look at this face. Okay, that's pretty funny.
That should be one of his thumbnails.
Yeah, it looks like he's trying to mew. Okay, so we'll go back. I need to hear this out one more time.
voting video talking about how capitalism prefigured itself in the 15 and 1600s.
Capitalism is an epical world economic order. When you say end capitalism, you're talking about a tectonic shift in global politics that is so much bigger than all of us that I don't really understand what course of action you're recommending. Like before capitalism, there was feudalism, and feudalism ended over hundreds of years of complex shifts in population and production, not because people just decided it was time to end feudalism. So won't capitalism end whenever—
I can't sit through it. I literally cannot sit through this, man. Like I cannot focus on what she's saying. Or whoops, I shouldn't have ContraPoints is a certain individual that I wouldn't necessarily use that word for, aside from looking at this individual.
Bruh.
I'm being presented with a certain look that obviously would go with one most of the time, but I just can't respect it. Okay, I'm sorry.
A new
Your bone structure is a dead giveaway.
That's the kind of thing that can be accomplished by a small group of activists. And I say small group because, I'm sorry to break it to you, but the vast majority of Americans are not communists.
I use this clip because I agree with Natalie that these tasks are enormous, that they are world historic, as was sometimes said by the historical left. The sorts of things that we need to do in order to build this
is a point where you can just skip ahead.
Wait, hold on.
Go ahead.
Apparently, also, yes, no communist circumcisions have existed. Both Marx and Trotsky were traitors.
For real.
Okay. We have Igna saying all caught up voting is based int.
Okay, thanks.
Capitalism are extremely painstaking and labor intensive. They're going to take an enormous amount of focus and devotion and learning about what kind of world it is that we want to see. And that's precisely why I'm an anti-electoralist, because the tasks at hand are not a part-time job.
Yeah, this is really just Kim kind of
something
bloviating here. You can skip ahead to my timestamp that I put was 1639.
Yeah, okay.
Unless you want to keep watching.
Like, do you want to skip to that part to where like he starts talking there and then you have a point, or it was
he's kind of just rambling here. There's not really a lot to respond to in this
that they can indeed
section.
Build an alternative. Radicals
Because he's
committing
just saying the
themselves to
same
transformation.
Here, we'll put it here.
Of society, to actually convincing large groups of people that they can indeed rebel against the system as it is, that they can indeed build an alternative, that they do indeed deserve a dignified life, not just begging for scraps from the table of their masters. That is not easy.
I will say,
not be carried out by.
He's got a great beard, some nice glasses as well.
I don't know about the glasses, but sure, the beard.
I like it. And I like the flannel too, like the red flannel. Like he really does have like a really great like ANCOM, like anarchist look. I like it.
I mean, if you're trying to look like an ANCOM, then I mean, I guess, yeah.
Yeah, but I don't think that's like a bad thing per se.
The glasses, I don't know. They feel kind of big.
Yeah, maybe.
Like they go way below his eyes.
What if he had your glasses?
What if he had my glasses?
Yeah,
that would probably be an improvement.
Yeah, probably.
As far as the look, yeah. I mean, if they were like little, yeah.
He's also got his like bookshelf. He's got the bike that he probably bikes to his work too. I don't know. You ever think of like, what if he just like works at McDonald's?
Does he not do YouTube? I thought he would have enough support.
He's insinuated in his videos that he's making money off of YouTube, but it's like it's not enough, I think.
Nah, Anark does look like he's into Polish shit, so it's accurate.
Well, I'm pretty sure he is, because yeah, he
is. You didn't see that?
Tweet.
Does Jack Reader not know about the tweet? Yeah, there's a tweet where he talks about how,
can you pull it up?
Yeah, actually.
Can we do it? I'm sorry, we have to.
Do you have it on hand?
Yeah.
Or should I just?
Well, here, actually, fuck. I don't
If you
even
have
know
it
if
on
I have it.
hand,
I don't have it
it's
on
easier.
hand,
Okay.
but I know I do have it.
Okay, so we said we weren't going to necessarily talk about this. This isn't an attack on his points made in the video. Okay, this isn't an ad hom. But
If anything, too, like we're actually kind of mostly agreeing with a lot of his points. The reason why I wanted to respond to this is because I think he makes some incorrect points, but I think also he makes some good broad points, but I think they could be expanded upon and made a lot better, and that's kind of what I wanted to do with this video. So really, like, this is more of like a partner to his video, an add-on to it, rather than like a per se critique.
the idea that
Yeah.
this is from Daniel Anark. The idea that polyamory roots from bourgeoisie decadence has literally no basis in reality. 99.9% of all polyamorous people are poor and middle class. Polyamory is a rejection of love and sex as acts of ownership or exclusivity, a negation of bourgeoisie property norms.
Where did he get that like 99.9% statistic from?
It says my browser has lost connection to my screen share audio. Oh, I guess because I'm not sharing a tab that has audio on it. That makes sense.
Yeah, we can still see it.
Yeah. Can you hear it if I play this though?
Oh no, we can't.
No? Okay. See that it says try sharing the screen again. Yeah, see, so stop, present. Ruh-roh, Raggy.
Weeks.
But the people who are spending.
Okay, we can hear it.
Okay. I have, oh my God, what the hell is going on? Hold on. I have two now things saying, let me just, oh, it didn't do anything?
Goober.
Because there was like two pop-ups for screen sharing,
Goober.
which was making me like kind of distracted there. Let's see. I didn't know that Arthur was an Ancom. Who's this in reference to? Arthur? Is he talking about like what Anark looks like? Like he looks like Arthur with the glasses because of the big round glasses. Is that it?
Maybe.
Spoiled the joke there.
Is that the joke?
I think that's it. I don't know about the tweet. LOL. Why the fuck would people blame my people for this shit? No non-secular Jewish person would support it.
Okay, but like, here's the thing though: is that like this is a tendency. This isn't just like. This is a tendency within Ancom circles. I mean, there was one that was literally saying monogamy was the new fascism. Do you remember that? There was a graffiti on the wall that was saying monogamy is the new fascism. Do you remember that?
I don't remember seeing that.
And then
but that makes
like,
much sense.
Yeah, and then there was a tweet kind of by it, but yeah, like this is a thing in like leftist circles because they they go down the intersectionality Oedipal rabbit hole.
Okay.
Are not the people who are out there building this alternative system. They're not the people who are prefiguring the new system that will replace capitalism. And there's a good reason for that. That's because these two are sort of mutually exclusive approaches. We're talking about the difference between reformism and direct action. And this sort of brings us back to her tweets. She asks,
hold on, let me go back a bit because I had a point. I kind of lost it just because we were paused for a while.
From the table of their masters. That is not easy. It will not be carried out by anyone in an electoral position. And I hate to say it, but the people who are spending all of their time worrying about elections are not the people who are out there building this alternative system. They're not the people who are prefiguring the new system that will replace capitalism.
Okay, I was going to talk about that right there where he says like, people building a new system that replaces capitalism. Just the point of the framing being off. Like economic systems are imposed by government, so to replace a system is to simply just find a more efficient method at upholding control over societies. So it just I guess there was a point about
be just referring to like a decentralized system that isn't top down managed. But again, I don't really know a lot of the specifics about what he advocates for.
Yeah, but there was a point about there was something about like feudalism being said there. I think earlier on that I don't know if we went over that. Let me see.
Well, yeah, because ContraPoints' point was that basically feudalism was the stage before capitalism, and it didn't come about through like, I don't know, just small networking. It was sort of like a big transition that happened. So I think I don't really know exactly her point. I think her point generally is just that like you need the state to carry out this this transition because it's so massive, basically.
Yeah, but ContraPoints mentions something about, like, I think it was ContraPoints' like point that feudalism like turned to capitalism, and because of, like, you know, people working to make it that way, as opposed to the governments just finding a more efficient method of like controlling people. So it the way they were framing it, which I'm trying to go back and find it because we skipped a little forward. I was going to say that, like, it makes it seem as if people like found feudalism to work best for them as opposed to having it imposed on them, was how it honestly sounded if you kind of like take what they were saying seriously. So I mean, like, and like the same would go for capitalism if we were talking about like a system of property titles acknowledged by the state. So I'm just trying to see exactly where that point was.
Into it. And we don't have anything to spare for all of this effort that we use to actively want to choose our, and that's precisely.
I don't know if it was back when ContraPoints was talking that thing that was like very boring that I couldn't listen to. I think I might have written it down about that.
Talking about a tectonic shift in global politics that is so much bigger than all of us that I don't really understand what course of action you're recommending. Like, before capitalism, there was feudalism, and feudalism ended over hundreds of years in complex shifts in population and production, not because people just decided it was time to end feudalism. So won't capitalism end just whenever a new economic system overtakes it? I don't think that's the kind of thing that can be accomplished by a small group of activists. And I say small group because, I'm sorry to break it to you, but the vast majority of Americans are not communists.
I use this clip because
I don't know if maybe I misinterpreted the point these people were trying to make.
I mean,
but
wouldn't
like,
that be an argument against voting, though? If her argument is that, like, oh, they're just a small group, so they're never going to accomplish anything. Well, can you say the same thing about voting? Like, oh, well, you're never going to get that big of a group to vote for the policies that you want.
But I guess what I would go off of is that like, you know, they're talking about a system replacing feudalism being capitalism, and then a system replacing capitalism. So I mean, if anything, that I think that's where I got that from, that
right.
You know, it's like as if people just found a better method and that's why things changed. So in the first place, was it the case that feudalism was just a result of there being some sort of organization that it's like, oh, well, this made the most sense at this time with these like resources, like, as opposed to it literally having been like a method of enslaving people?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I'm just a little bit confused on what they're trying to say about this, or if that is actually how to interpret it. But yeah, I guess we could just go forward because this is really not that important to the point here.
Yeah.
So we'll just go a little bit forward again.
Joe Biden and direct action. And this sort of brings us back to her tweets. She asks, what kind of achievements has the revolutionary left made in the time in between the election of Joe Biden and the current day? And the answer is very little. And the reason that answer is true is because revolutionary activity from the bottom up is not an on-off switch. It's something you have to build from a very small constituency to a very large constituency. It's a slow process of getting people these small gains that build into bigger and bigger gains. And it's very easy, if you're not engaged in it, to sit and criticize from the sidelines.
I feel like so much internet politics, whether radical or
all right, we can pause it there because I did have a tangent that I wanted to go on real quick. So basically, I think we should probably address the elephant in the room, which is that you know, what's your solution? What is going to bring about the conditions that we want? And you know, we've been critical of sort of leftist strategies, we've been critical of the LP, we've been critical of a lot of things. I've even been critical of counter economics, not as like a strategy per se, but sort of as the conduit through which things are first achieved. So I guess over the last year or so, my shifting has been focusing away from things like counter economics as a strategy for a few key reasons.
Covfefe reasons.
Real. So first is basically that the current condition that we're living in right now is not really a condition where people can start in mass networking counter-economically, and in large part is really just not profitable. And for that reason, I really don't think it's very useful to form these kinds of networks if you're not in a position to actually network, because then those networks actually don't directly cut off the supply line of the state. And I think what I've ultimately realized is that the things that are going to be the biggest blows to the key pillars of the state as an institution really are not going to be things developed in like a small local counter-economic network, and then it builds out from there. A lot of these things are going to need to be developed within and with the resources of the white market in order to actually cripple the organization of the state. It's important to remember that the state isn't God. Just because it's developed within the white market doesn't automatically mean it's going to be banned, or that the state is going to be aware of it, or that, they're even aware of how subversive that thing is. Two notable examples that we've seen are cryptocurrency and 3D printed firearms, which we've mentioned ad nauseum, but they're very good examples. There are other forms that are going to come out, decentralized internet software, privacy-based tools, more online tools and sites for violating IP laws, drone technology, Saphosys projects, advances in 3D printing, more innovations to cryptocurrency to make it easier for normies to use it instead of using fiat, new fuel sources, and a lot more ideas that we haven't even thought of. But I think these are the things that are going to be the key pillars of the state, because ultimately, if they cut the ability for the state to impose itself as this tentacle leviathan in society, then that by default makes it easier for everyone in the society to avoid the state's decrees even more, because the state as an organization has been directly attacked. Whereas a counter-economic network on itself, without changing the conditions for violence or directly targeting the state directly, it's basically a network that kind of just does nothing. It just sits there, not funding the state for a bit, and then collapses. But if you don't want that to happen again, if you don't want these networks to collapse, you need to make it easier for your everyday person, not just a highly specialized libertarian, to go off and homestead a plot of land and not actually have the state challenge that land claim because they can't fund their military. If they can't fund their military because people are tax resisting, that actually helps, but they can only do that if it's actually easier for people to do that. I guess my main problem with counter economics as a starting point for the attack on the state is that you're starting from a position where the actual networking against the state isn't very easy. And I don't think the counter economics itself makes it easier for that to happen. So I think that once these innovations start to happen, then you're going to get into a position where now people can en masse start doing that. And like Conkin has sort of mentioned, is that once you have everything exchanging within a black market, you have a libertarian society, because you don't have a third party intervening on those exchanges. They're all voluntary and through contract. So yeah, I guess I'd say that's kind of my rant. But yeah, I didn't know if you had anything more to say about that.
I was just going to check out some of the chats here. We had Jack Reader saying Western culture is pretty much already dead. Unfortunately, the West has fallen and has been dying since Christianity became the majority, in my opinion. I would say yes, because of things like collectivism, altruism, mysticism. But bro, it's just pathetic. I don't know exactly what he was referencing that sentence to, but same thing is going to happen in the Muslim countries. By the way, it's probably going to be faster. Christianity and Islam are the biggest LARPs ever created. I don't know where he got this from. Like, where
I think they're just cults, not really LARPs.
Well, I was just going to say,
other than like maybe the trad cats.
This is a topic. I was just going to say this is a topic.
Right.
Like, I don't know where that was coming from necessarily. I think it was just because he was talking about like I guess this went from like the polygamy stuff. Yeah, well, but let's see. So we have James saying, I suspect that ContraPoints is employing dialectical / historical materialism here. Yes, but I'm just trying to make sense of it, and unfortunately, that can't be the case. So let's see. We have GG like grow. What kind of politics is this? Anti.
Well, yeah. I mean, I would need a bit more of a specific question.
I think he's trying to say, what are we saying politically? Or I guess this seems to be in reference to us in the stream. So
yeah.
Yeah, I kind of answered that
All right.
with no politics. It's the idea that just politics as, I mean, first of all, as like the idea that you can somehow take a hold of the state and steer it in whatever direction you want is just senseless, because the state as an organization has the leverage over us. So, it being the case that they would somehow have to just, I mean, like succumb to the will of the people is just something that you're not going to see, because I mean, like, what incentive is there for the government to be doing that when it is employing this power over people. And that's sort of the government's whole role, or what it is established for and to continue doing. So if you have that being the case, how could it also be the case that people somehow have a say in how the government exercises that? Because if you had that as the case, the problem is that the government actually needs to be, I mean, in its own way of, existing. Not that I'm saying I support it needing to do that, but it is the case that for the government to exist, it needs to do that. So the government's justification would be that these things need to be the case the way they are. The policies need to be enforced the way they are so that it can continue existing. And you're not going to have sort of the idea that people can just like put their input into how they want things controlled, being the way that the state actually operates, because at that point, then the state isn't doing what it needs to do to maintain its existence.
Yeah, for sure.
So let's see. He said, just found this randomly, so trying to get the context. Yeah, of course. That's understandable. I was just trying to explain it to you best I can in a short minute there. Let's see. We have James saying Ahmed is Ayn Rand pilled. Well, if you've been paying attention in the Discord, you'd know that has been true for a while. We have Filthy Heretic saying Jack Reader is going to go full Hoppe, and he's a leftist. I don't know if he's going to, do that in the sense of, Hoppe being the guy that he looks toward, but I can see why you'd make that connection. We're anarchists, is what Filthy says. Yeah, I mean,
those are politics.
I think he just accidentally hit send on the we part, and then he meant to say we're anarchists. Yeah. I was referencing the poly stuff. Oh, that's what I kind of made that connection to, Jack, when I was saying the whole like Western culture and all those chats right there.
The West has fallen.
The West has fallen. It's unfortunate, but the West has fallen. Okay.
When was it not fallen?
Well, I mean,
that's the real question.
Jack gave a theory.
When did it fall?
Jack gave his theory.
Gotcha.
Let's see. Oh, well, he comes back with some more of this. Both Christianity and Islam are knockoffs of Judaism and are rejections of their own base culture religions like paganism, or for the Muslim countries, the Egyptian gods, or Zoroastrianism for Iran. And then we have James saying nothing ever happens.
I mean, again, I'm not really that much of a religion expert, but I don't per se disagree, I guess.
Well,
I mean,
the New
I
Testament
wouldn't really
is
say
like,
knockoffs, though. I would just say
stemming from the Old Testament, but it depends on what kind of Judaism you're talking about. We're not going to get too much into that, but there are some documents other than just the Old Testament as far as like modern Judaism. And then I guess just, I don't know, if you want to look to Christianity, I guess is, being in a sense like some sort of improvement. You had like Aquinas, who was trying to sort of like logically prove God, even though it was not necessarily proving like Jesus, but he was still trying to prove God logically. And when you try to employ logic when it comes to religion, you kind of just dissolve the aspect of religion, which is the mysticism, which is actually pretty based. So
when you go to become Kierkegaard pilled, if you're going to go down the religious point, well, because Kierkegaard basically argued that, okay, well, like the entire point of religion is that it's faith-based. So if you're going to be religious, like trying to logically prove God by like deduction or whatever is basically just going against the point of religion, which, for him it was an argument in favor of religion, but for us it would be an argument against it.
Let's see. Okay, so yeah, we just have some people, or I guess Jack just talking about Hoppe, but we'll go back to our reaction here.
Cool.
You see through all the bullshit, the corrupt system, the electoral farce. But all you're doing about it is sitting here shitposting and demeaning the people who are actually trying to accomplish what little can be accomplished. And in effect, edgy leftists who complain about both sides and do nothing are no different from edgy centrists who complain about both sides and do nothing.
That's what you're engaged in, Natalie. People who are doing this work are spending so much time and effort and resisting burnout, even when things are so hard. It's very difficult work, and it can often be very discouraging. And I understand how, looking from the outside, it looks like nothing is being done, but things are being done. It's just not flashy. We don't have a multi-billion-dollar marketing campaign that's spreading news of everything that's taking place. And so I know it seems like nothing is happening, but that's because, as you said,
nothing ever
it's a
happens.
slow process. What we really need is more people to engage in it. We need more people to promote these small victories as they take place. And we need people like you, Natalie, to recognize.
I can't even like focus on this.
I didn't even catch that at first.
Dude, I didn't until you just spoiled it.
That these games are obviously not going to be on the scale of what the state has achieved in any given span of time, because the state holds all the power. It's like going to a feudal serf or some small merchant in the feudal era and asking them, what has your business achieved in the span of time since this lord or this king has reigned? There's no way that merchant could claim that anything they had done had added up to anything that one of these huge landed estates underneath a lord had achieved, or what some king at the head of a nation had achieved. And yet it was the activity of all of those people that were carrying out this new form of capitalism, that were building out things like the guilds to protect the peasants from the expansion of private property. That,
bro, I love regulations. Also, this is, yeah, I mean, if anything, I mean, I know the whole idea here being it's like, oh, well, there's more protection for us under capitalism or whatever compared to feudalism, or I guess whatever. But I don't know. It just sounds like you're endorsing it a bit there.
Yeah, and we'll get into that a bit later, because he'll get into that point where he sort of shills for it a bit more.
Gave us the conditions that later took over the entire world system. So what I'm trying to intimate to you now is that you're kind of like a lord apologist in the time of feudalism that is speaking down to the people who are engaged with the guilds, speaking down to the lowly merchant class who's not yet risen to world power. And I'm trying to get you to sympathize with these people who are in the process of making these sort of embryonic bodies that may one day develop into something much more powerful, and trying to get you to take seriously how hard this task is, how much effort it really takes to devote your mind and your spirit to doing these things, even when you're constantly surrounded by naysayers and distractions from people that all they care about is who gets elected next and what law gets passed. All the while, things are just constantly devolving into fascism. It feels like you're being gaslit by society. You're trying to build the alternative. You're trying to build the life raft that can actually help people survive this transition into an incredibly dangerous, violent, scary time. And you're constantly being told that instead you should be devoting your efforts to caring about who Joe Biden picks as the head of the FTC.
Yeah, so I actually love that. That's probably my favorite part of the whole thing. I actually am probably going to use that quote, because I mean, Anark, if you're watching, that's a really great quote. It feels like you're being gaslit by society, which I think is 100% correct, and it's something that me and you have talked about. Probably the whole theme of Civil Offense and my podcast is that, like, the state's propaganda model essentially ropes people completely into a political worldview, that it presupposes that every solution has to be political, or that the citizens through democracy actually control the behavior and the policies of the government if they just vote in the people who have the right policies. And, as we've talked about, the policies that is enacted by, these politicians, that are enacted by these politicians, can correlate with their proposed platform and ideology. But as far as the reasons for why they're actually carrying out those actions is going to depend in large part upon the financial and technical interests of the state war machine first. As we've noted, Woodrow Wilson famously campaigned ideologically on an anti-war campaign. That's how he got elected for his second term. His whole slogan was literally, he kept us out of war. And then as soon as he got elected, he joined World War I, because, at that point, there was a financial gain for the U.S. to join that late stage into the game so they could get a seat at the table. And there were other, I'm not a historian, so again, you can criticize me if I get something wrong, but interestingly enough, FDR's whole argument against Hoover was actually I don't know if you know this, Ahmed, but FDR's one of his main arguments against Herbert Hoover was on a platform that advocating against excess government spending and deficits that were started by the Hoover administration. That was actually one of his big criticisms, was that Hoover's a big spender. He has these big deficits, and then he got into office, and we all know the story from there. More modern examples, Bush himself got into office while he was debating Al Gore, campaigning against the military intervention in the Middle East of the Clinton administration. Same with Obama and Trump. Remember ending the forever wars? No more wars, no more wars. We're ending the forever wars. Tell that to all the dead Yemeni children that got their supply lines cut off. I'm laughing, but it really isn't funny.
War, but there were no new wars.
We continued all the old wars, but there weren't any new ones because we
That's
didn't
an
have
accomplishment that no other president in my lifetime has seen.
It's actually amazing. Yeah. Imagine LBJ going into office and his argument is for the Vietnam Wars. In our administration, we started no new wars. I don't know why I'm doing a Trump impression for LBJ, but
it's addictive. Sometimes you just start attributing Trump's voice to other, because it's the impression of impressions, right? It's something like you go to that one as impersonating Trump because you're thinking about him. So then you just go to somebody else and you're like, well, I need an impression, but I don't know what this person sounds like. Well, you're filling that gap in your brain.
Right. It's like FDR goes in and for his fourth term and he's like, well, we started no new wars. That's our accomplishment. Well, technically actually, I'm trying to remember if Yemeni was started under the Trump administration. I think it actually was, but it might have been an Obama thing, but
I'm pretty sure it was.
Ultimately, it doesn't really matter.
I'm pretty sure it was during Obama and that Trump
continued and expanded. It got worse.
Trump was just still selling weapons to the Saudis.
Yeah, the actual engagement of the U.S. and their backing of Saudi Arabia got way worse under the Trump administration. The drone strikes got worse, surprisingly. You remember that was a big meme, Obama, the pro-human, did more drone strikes than Bush. Well, Trump did double the drone strikes than Obama, technically. That's what his administration did. And I don't think it's just him, too. You gotta remember, he has all these war financier interests that are under him, quote unquote, that have been in office for years and years and years longer than he has, that know how the system works, knows what is profitable and necessary for the state to continue maintaining its own interests. War is very, very profitable of the state. I think that was that H.L. Mencken quote, war is the health of the state. And this is, early anarchists prior to Rothbard touching upon the same stuff that we are, is that the state is a technical institution. There's the political means and the I'm trying to remember. There's the voluntary and the political means, of obtaining wealth. And if you're an organization that literally bases yourself on obtaining your wealth through aggression, and you don't produce anything, and that's the other thing too, is that the state literally is by default doesn't produce anything. It can only steal resources that already exist. So that creates a system where in order for it to survive, it has to just keep stealing resources as much as it can without crippling the economy completely. So this is why we've seen liberalization policies, or, again, if you were going to defend stuff like deregulation, which we're not criticizing on ethical grounds, but, technically the Soviet Union did industrialize, the Soviet Union had more of a market-based economy than prior to, because prior to that, it was more of a feudal-based peasant era economy. So it was industrializing for the first time, even though it was under heavy state central planning. The administration prior was actually a lot more feudalistic. So from that standpoint, yeah, the Soviet Union did regulate, but why did it do that? Do you think it did that because, it ideologically wanted to, it cared so much about free markets? I don't think that's the case. I did have another point too. Also I did want to talk about Mlih as well. He's sort of an example of a candidate who, in large part, followed through with their plans on deregulating. So, we talked about politicians in large part disobeying their promises. So even if you do vote for a candidate, there's no actual guarantee that they could have enacted their policies. Like, you could have elected Mlih, and he could have very easily just turned around and, I don't know, for example, started throwing, rubber bullets into the crowds. And he could have very easily turned around and started chilling for Israel. Oh, wait. he's doing that. But I mean, in all seriousness, like, he could have been way worse, right? Like he could have not deregulated in those industries. He could have not done all these things, and you would have had no power to do so, because again, you have no guarantee or even a high likelihood that politicians are going to obey their promises, because they almost never do. Politicians get elected on these platforms, and then they say, "Oh, well, we'll do that eventually. We'll do these things eventually." And we're kind of seeing the same thing with the Mlih administration, And again, there's Congress that he has to deal with, so there's that factor as well. But a lot of these things are being attributed to Mlih specifically, so that's why we want to point it out. But even in the case where he does follow through on deregulating or lowering tax rates or whatever, there are very clear financial ties and beneficiaries that benefit from these programs. We're talking about the state under Argentina literally gaining more revenue by selling off its government property titles. These property titles that they literally never had a right to sell in the first place, making these contracts null under ANCAP legal theory. And these property titles, in addition to that, are being sold to, who are going to be able to afford these large, like, multi-million, $100,000 grants. It's not going to be ordinary private citizens. It's going to be large fucking industries that are already state connected. So, the people who can afford to shell out that kind of money, the money that they got from being beneficiaries of the state, I think it's very obvious that a lot of these things that are seen as sort of deregulatory really aren't libertarian, because they're unilateral and aggressive, but on top of that, just aren't getting us closer to freedom. I think they're doing actual business deals with, like, American monopolies now. They're doing, some of that may be inaccurate, but they're doing a lot of, like, American trade deals with these companies. Fucking voice crack. Anyway, excuse me. They're doing like the whole dollarization program too. But really, it does strike me as ridiculous to see this as anything other than the state trimming its fat to make it run more efficiently, or in other words, what we like to call corporatism and liberalism.
And they'll sell it to you as you being freer.
Right. Look, he's wearing the ANCAP suit. Look at his funny dances. He was in a rock band. He literally said that he'd wipe his ass with the state. Come on, guys.
Afuera!
Afuera! Afuera!
Afuera!
Afuera! Afuera!
Yeah.
Into the hands of large corporations that are state connected.
Yeah, I mean, privatize that airport. It's not like the government was failing while running it, and that severing it from the state control will actually just help it be more profitable again.
Yeah,
it's not like the state is wasting money running it, and if they just make it more profitable by just by running things on their own, that we're not going to have an industry that booms back. I can't even conceive of that.
Okay, look, this doesn't benefit the state in any way. This only benefits the small private individual. This does not help the state in any way. This doesn't keep the state from collapsing that it otherwise would have had it not done these policies. It's perfectly fine, guys.
Let's see.
I mean, shit, that's not even also to mention the literal police brutality under the administration, that ANCAP circles are literally just cheering because well, if the state's committing NAP violations, then it's fine because, socialists are subhuman.
So we have people talking about West is fallen, religion and stuff. That is probably going to have to be a conversation for later. Maybe we'll get to it. I mean, we kind of did start talking about it, but we have to get back to the video, honestly. But I am going to take a few more chats here related to the topic before we get back to things. Okay, so we have James saying Anark is somewhat on the right track, TBH. So that's the thing. I was thinking that as well, but I feel like we're moments off, in my opinion, from just having that maybe not feeling like the case anymore. let's see. So we have, okay, that's a long chat between you guys. Let's see. James saying the Argentine state is just getting stronger by fixing their economic troubles. Yeah, that's exactly what they recruited Mlih for. So even when a politician is like, actually, quote unquote, fulfilling their promises or whatever, it's just a matter of, hey, like they actually wanted somebody to be putting forth these sort of policies so that the state could, again, trim its fat, restructure, do things which will actually benefit it. And so, it really just depends on what the state needs to do. Like if the state shouldn't, like if it's not beneficial for the state to be enforcing certain things, even if the law gets passed, what's the guarantee that the state's going to enforce it or not? There is none. It really is up to whether the state needs to. And then we have Ignis saying, the path forward for anarchism, in my view, will be through counter-economic tech, Ancat mentioned, in addition to private communities which implement NAP legal theory as much as possible. From there, let's see, should you live in one, you have a great local connection to other anarchists from which gray and black market activity can occur. And, there's the possibility, probably highly likely, if it's disruptive in any manner, that the government's going to come shut it down, right? That's the part about it, that to actually be outside of the norms, to actually counter the norms of the state, there has to be, it can't really be done through the state's process. And even if you, let's say, get the land from the state, like, get approved and such, and you can still manage to do things which aren't, acceptable by the norm, in which you're running things. Yeah, that really just doesn't stop them from coming in and shutting you down. So,
well, I would say though is that if they actually are technologies that are actually subversive, then some things just can't be very easily shut down. So, we've seen this with cryptocurrency. Governments have been trying to ban it for decades.
We're talking here about a physical location in which there's counter-economic activity between people.
Yeah.
So it's a lot easier to do something like that than to, try and shut something down that can't really be stopped. Like, for even like the 3D printed like gun stuff, like you can't really shut down the actual sharing of the files or like, the technology being out there. But when it comes to like a locatable community that, they know where it is and they can get an idea of what's happening through surveillance, or even if people were to be talking about it very openly, there's likely going to be problems. I'm not saying it's impossible to do it like that, depending on how many resources the state has, or like what kind of resources the state has, I guess I should phrase it as, to be able to shut it down, how many are going on, and if the state actually is able to stop all of them. There are other factors, but let's say like it's like one location that the state very much knows about because it's being posted on YouTube. It's not going to be great. But he says, let the state come, let them expand their resources and make a big show about it, utilize it for PR. How will they shut it down? A Fed on every corner trying to bust a raw milk deal? Literally, because, I don't know about a Fed on every corner, but there was a literal raid recently that I saw on somebody's property where they were forced to give up a bunch of raw milk. Literally that. So yeah, that's the thing.
They're shutting down they will shut down lemonade stands.
Right. So that's the thing. Like, okay, so let's say that's the worst that happens. There's a PR thing about it and it spreads more awareness of it. It could be worse than that. I'm just saying, like, you could be sacrificing a lot by trying to do something, depending on what you're trying to do, depending on what it looks like, depending on what kind of activity is going on. And it doesn't matter if you're being peaceful about it. The state may still take it to an extreme, and may
stay peaceful.
Yeah. There's no guarantee you're going to be all right after that. Either whether it be, just financially, or whether it be, like your time, like who knows what may happen as far as, getting arrested or something, or worse.
Well, I would just say one more thing too, is that you have to sacrifice risk for reward. So again, if it's not profitable to you, then there really is no point in doing it. There is psychic profit, but again, you have to do what you can that isn't going to cripple your livelihood or increase that level of risk that, to the extent that you are willing to profit. So again, I would just say that like Ignis said, I don't think the solution is to just totally not do any counter econ, even to start, even if you're not making like an innovation that's subversive to the state, because your actions can be beneficial, but I would just say, like, just be careful about it.
We have Jack saying, actually, relevant question. Do you believe India has a likelihood of becoming anarchist? I think they are most likely for a couple of key reasons. You know, if India were to become anarchist, it would be anarchist, quote unquote, in the same sense that Haiti is. And also India, like Indian men being unfettered. I'm just going to say, I don't think would result in the best thing ever. You probably wouldn't want to go to India. I wouldn't want to go to India now. But yeah, no, I just think, I don't know why your mind went to India, but
Of all countries,
even so, I don't think it would be, you know, I don't think they're going to have like voluntarism or like free markets or something. You know, it's like, I don't really see the evidence for why you would be saying it's headed. I mean, I guess if anarchist is just your goal as far as like lack of, single state control, like unilaterally, and maybe competing political factions or like political violence included, then maybe, I don't know. I mean, if you're saying that you think the government's going to collapse, but you know, there may be another one that just sprouts up, then okay. Yeah. And Filthy says, do you have information about trends in India we're unaware of? Yeah, I really don't get why that's the place. I mean, if Jack wants to make a case for it, sure. But I don't think I really just don't have reason to believe it would be even like anarchist in the sense of like, this is actually like an area where there is no political authority.
Yeah, you should, if you want an argument against that, just try the Pindia challenge. Yeah, we continue.
Or, you know, what politician said what on national television last week. It's not that those things don't matter. It's that if we want to see the system actually altered, you should be trying to build power from the bottom up. But I also want to answer some of the questions in her tweets a little more directly. So let's get back to a couple.
Oh, actually, okay, one more thing.
It's really easy to point out
about the Mlih thing. I did want to point out is that one of the big responses to the whole Mlih rant that we both just engaged in is, well, you know, well, obviously he can't be perfect. You know, there's going to be some NAP violations. You know, it's not like he can instantly get rid of everything at once. Why are you criticizing him when he's done so much good stuff, etc.? And I guess, like, my response is just that I think it's just, that just kind of comes off as pure coat, because if we're not going to criticize all governments, even the ones who tout the label libertarian, quote unquote, then who will? You know, not a single ANCAP has ever called the police violence out. They've all been in support of it because it has the libertarian label. You know, some have called out the Israel shit, but honestly, it's just because it's so obviously fucking horrid that they can't, they literally can't bury it under the rug, you know, and even some of them had defended it, you know, so, but they haven't with the rubber bullets, the removing consequences for police brutality, not the gaining of the revenue or the other shit that we mentioned, you know, and this is the reason why I think the reason why is because once someone takes political power that you like, suddenly the critiques toward the state are nowhere to be found. Suddenly it's a good state that's on my side and doing good things. And I'm not saying that they literally believe this, although, you know, some of them do. It's just to say that this is a tendency in their mentality when this happens. You had the exact same thing happen when Lenin took power. And, you know, who were the only socialists to take firm opposition? Well, the anarchists. And they got fucking murdered for it. So...
James put this image in my server.
That's great. We need Nice to create another Wojak puppet. Bro, you're mewing. You're mewing hard. Bye.
Okay. Let's get back to this. Who's clapping cheeks back there, bro?
Don't worry about it.
I heard that before I played the video. It's like, it sounds like somebody's clapping back there. All right.
The electoralist left as online misanthropes whose politics is firebomb a Walmart and then not firebombing a Walmart. It would help to dispel that myth if they were more vocal about what specifically their methods have achieved. We're all frustrated that the Democrats aren't stronger, more effective, further left, savvier about strategy. But the Democrats can at least point to some significant accomplishments in the last 4 years. A major climate bill, infrastructure investment, nominating Justice Jackson. So what I emphasize here is that even if what you're looking for is electoral gains, if what you're looking for is changes in legislation, you should understand that it is bottom-up pressure that creates these things. Joe Biden and all the rest of them wouldn't have instituted anything progressive in their policies if it had not been for a bottom-up movement that was pushing them to do so. And
this is
Okay,
where
yeah.
I wanted to say that, he really didn't actually get it. Like James was saying, well, it seems like he's getting it mostly. Nope. So I was originally going to say that he hasn't really mentioned the fact that voting is like begging the state, who has total leverage over our lives, and over the people it controls, to do what they want it to do. People don't get to tell the state to do these things, like they just beg it. And so not only is it ineffective to vote, there's no reason for the state to abide by these demands, and thus it's meaningless. So, even if it's a Democrat or Green Party or whoever's being voted in, and here you are thinking like maybe he'll agree with that if he just hears you out, but I would have said the understanding is just missing this, but he's getting here and saying, well, actually politics are effective. It's just voting, but people can get it, politicians from the bottom up, to be pressured to make these moves that we like. And at that point, does it really make sense to say that, it actually doesn't make sense to vote for a Democrat? Because is it a Republican in your view, Anark, that is going to succumb to this pressure from the bottom up, as you put it? Or is it going to be a Democrat? Is it going to be a Green Party member? So it seems like, if anything, your point at this point would have to be, well, we can actually get them to do what we want them to do. So why not vote for a Democrat? Why not vote for the Green Party? Why not vote for this person, that person, that person, that can at least ideologically align with what we're saying, so that when we're able to place some pressure on these politicians, it'll be the people that'll actually do something about it. So guess what? It's like you nullify your whole point there, where it's like, well, actually, I don't believe voting's the actual method. It doesn't make sense. Like, you're wasting your time when you could be organizing. But you're telling me that you still believe, in your own view, like your whole narrative, that if a Republican were in office, if it were Trump, if it were, the other Republicans, that if you were to somehow place the same pressure on them, that you also believe at the same time that they would be doing what you want them to do at that point. That doesn't make sense. Like, it's not a coherent argument.
Yeah, exactly. And the other thing too is that he's arguing that pressure from the bottom up is what is causing these things. Like, I'm not even disagreeing to some extent, but what major dangerous pressure was the state facing for its climate inflation bill? Like, leftists don't even touch grass, yet alone put pressure on the government to do anything.
Wouldn't the pressure from his view have to be like, we're not going to vote for you again if you don't do this thing? Like, what else do politicians face pressure on in this view?
Well, I think he would argue that, like, okay, well, like unionizing or like protesting maybe, but like, yeah, I don't know. Like, none of those things create any serious pressure, really, for the state. And you might argue that, like, oh, well, my 1800s, mid 19th century, but I would argue that those things aren't really causing the state to have, pressure to enact these things either. I think there are probably a lot more important financial incentives there for the state to do these things. Than just mass strikes at corporations, because again, they're like the corporations. They're the ones getting hit, not really the state. So yeah.
Okay. So,
and then also just the other big problem that we probably should address is that he somehow sees all these government policies that points out as a progressive. In other words, they're somehow a positive thing. Like, you see the anarchists here. We're talking about the state literally stealing money from its citizens through taxation and monopolizing entire industries that it has a stranglehold on. We're talking about the state using its violence to restrict the free trade of these people. Aren't ANCOMs supposed to be fine with free market individualist trade as long as it, doesn't recreate capitalism? He also realizes that these laws that he's praising are enforced on everyone, right? Including the 9-year-old girl with the lemonade stand, right? Not just capitalists.
Oh, she's a capitalist. She's a capitalist pig.
Yeah, real.
And it should be understood that historically, almost all of the gains that we take for granted were actually achieved by a bottom.
What do you know about gains?
Real.
Up movement, not by the politicians who carried them out. The politicians who carried them out were only doing that because there was such an overwhelming pressure from below that they hardly had an option otherwise. In fact, here in the United States and in a lot of other places in the early 1900s, that huge wave of social democratic gains that took place, those were achieved by the workers' movement. The progressive era of FDR and all the others didn't just come about because they thought, hey, I think it's about time we give some handouts to the workers. They came about because there was an enormous movement that they were afraid was going to carry out a revolution in the United States or elsewhere in other countries. And these movements didn't just come about wholesale because people said one day, hey, let's hold a protest. They had to be prefigured slowly from a gradual process that originated in the early to mid 1800s in a lot of places. And those processes, those organizations, those unions, those federations, they built up, they accumulated more and more power until they could just carry out a strike. They could just do an enormous protest that was actually a threat to the power structure. And they gained all kinds of things in that process. These movements were responsible for the minimum wage, healthcare expansions, workplace protections, the weekend. That's right. The very concept of the weekend, limits on work days, the end of child labor, unemployment benefits. And given that they also swept a bunch of social democrats into office across the planet, they also led to regulations on industry, sweeping infrastructure plans, and an enormous number of other things that we take completely for granted now. But
so guess what? He's saying that the laws that are passed are valid, right? Okay. And so he's saying, well, I mean, even beyond just, these regulations are good. He's saying that, basically his standard is just no different from any person who views politics as valid. What that person would see gains as is just no different from what he would see gains as, because it's really just about these compiling texts in a law book that it's like, now people are having their rights respected. They have weekends, and stuff. And so, he really just hasn't rejected politics, as we can see. It's just the idea that, I mean, actually at this point, what is the argument against voting other than it just takes time to be invested in like learning about it, right? I mean, it's like, that seems like your only argument at this point. But at this point, it's like, I mean, now he's making, if anything, he's like, because he accepts politics, he's still making a case for why people should vote without even admitting it. Like he's just saying, I reject voting, but his advocacy for what should be done is within a political context, and it is something that is just, I mean, if anything, you could just not use the same argument that he's using against voting and use all of this to say, actually, here's why you should vote.
Right. And the other thing too is that this is kind of what poor econ does to a motherfucker, where you don't realize that state intervention is actually the cause of these monopolies, how these regulations are not harming corporations. They're actually propping them up because they're placing barriers to entry for competition to weaken those corporations. And this is just why it's just so stupid to dismiss like the work of someone like Rothbard as, he's a shill for capitalism. Like when his entire body of work, especially his economic work, is literally pointing out how state intervention is propping up these industries and keeping it so that these workers are in a have shitty wages, how they can get away with charging these inordinate prices, and all the shit that you complain about, but you won't read him because, he's a capitalist. Well, read the progressive era, motherfucker, that you defend, where he goes into detail, like, for fucking 5, like, I don't know how many chapters that book is, but it's a lot of chapters, pointing out how the entire progressive era was basically just a licensing scheme for big business that you criticize. And you're saying, the progressive era was great. Well, I guess you're a capitalist shill now.
Yeah.
If you, and then just even getting into the Austrian economics, when you read, for instance, chapter 10 of Man, Economy, and State by Rothbard, where he covers this issue extensively, all these things that you're listing, all these laws, minimum wage, etc., they're placing barriers to entry for these corporations. And they're limiting the competitors that are entering the market that are going to reduce the bargaining power of these corporations. And that's kind of where he points out how monopolies really are a uniquely state construction, and they can't emerge naturally through voluntary interaction, which is supposed to be something that you support. Chapter 12 also is a very great chapter. I'd recommend reading the entirety of Power and Market, because there he kind of covers violent intervention. I mean, even the socialist individualists like Benjamin Tucker in his essay The Four Monopolies pointed this out, like pre-Austrian individualists who argued for the LTV, covered this exact same phenomenon. Not with as much depth or accuracy, but just like please stop basing your economic theory on Marxist Capital or reading like Paul Krugman New York Times articles. He's literally a state-paid crony pedophile. Okay, you're consuming government propaganda. Also,
Here's
one
the
more thing too. Like he mentions he literally thinks the weekend couldn't have existed without the state.
Well,
Like,
I
bruh.
mean, would we have gotten the same albums from him though?
I mean, honestly, I don't know. I don't think we would have gotten the trilogy album. I don't think we would have gotten After Hours if it were the government.
Exactly.
So honestly,
Today, everybody
it was his all the chicks that are fucking cheating on him and like fucking him and stuff that are and all the drugs that he's getting are just from like CIA agents. They're all feds, and that's like
Yes.
what fuels him to make the good music that he does. Also,
be.
like I did need to mention unemployment benefits. He points out as like a positive thing.
Shit.
Like, bruh. Like Kropotkin himself, like we mentioned, argued against progressive taxation to fund social programs. Are you fucking kidding me? Also, infrastructure. The state needs to build the roads. Who will build the roads? He's constructing the roads argument again because he doesn't have a strong Austrian economic foundation to realize that state intervention in these aspects of the economy are not a benefit. They're not an economic boon. I know you obviously don't want the state to exist in the end, but if you see it as like a temporary economic boon, it's not even that. It's the opposite of that, actually.
All right.
Yeah, we can continue.
Instant gratification. They want to see the results right now. But you can't get results like the things that I just listed by going out and holding a protest out of nowhere. We can't just snap our fingers and have results. So it can be really frustrating when you're on the ground trying to construct the sort of constituency that could extract those sorts of results again, to be told that what you're doing doesn't matter, or that it hasn't achieved as much as the state achieved when it was pressured to do things. Obviously, we don't have the power of the state. If we did, we wouldn't be in this predicament. So that means if you want electoral outcomes, you should still be mostly focused on the creation and promotion of bottom-up movements. However, the opposite cannot be said. So if we focused all of our attention and efforts on electoral approaches, we would not, in fact, get a huge bottom-up movement as a result. And in fact, what we've seen over the last few decades is that the more effort that we put on elections, the more time and energy and attention that we've put into electoral outcomes, we've not seen that we got more progressive outcomes. We've seen that there's been a slow slide towards fascism, and that the Democrats, having no anchor from the bottom to stop them from the drift, have instead just become these sort of mealy-mouthed center.
Is this slow slide toward fascism in the room with us right now? Like,
yeah,
I don't know. Like, I mean, yes, the government has gotten more authoritarian. Well, in the sense of like, it's more apparent to people that, the government will crack down. I don't even know if that's the case really, but the government doesn't have more power. The government doesn't have more of an ability to control lives. I guess like, you see increasingly like the government tries to convince people that they need more, like state influence in their lives. Like, I guess you can make that case, but how this is the product of like fascism specifically, I really don't see that.
He needs to define what that means. I mean, I guess he doesn't need to every time, but it is a tendency within leftist circles that they don't really do that.
Like, does he just mean authoritarianism, or? I mean,
no.
Because you can't really make that point, because I mean, he's saying he wants more control in industries, he wants more regulations. I mean, so it can't really be, I'm anti-authoritarian and that's what's happening. So, I mean, if you want to explain what's going on, then sure.
Well, to leftists, basically fascism is essentially just anyone to the right of Hillary Clinton, or even Hillary Clinton.
Yeah.
But like basically, to Trump, like Trump is a fascist because for like a variety of reasons, but like they see it more as like a cultural kind of thing, like a hyper nationalist, often racially motivated, often like hyper appeal to tradition, using the state as a club to crush democracy or whatever, a variety of different things. But like that's generally why they consider they're a lot more hostile to like fascism than they would be something like Marx-Leninism, because culturally they're more aligned with them, and
But don't you think it's
they pay more lip service to trans people.
don't
The
you think it's
right wing
funny
doesn't.
though? Don't you think it's funny though how the progressives will say we're getting closer to fascism, but at the same time, people on the right will be like we're slowly getting toward like this leftist totalitarian society, like this progressive like nightmare. So it's like at the same time, like both sides are saying, oh, we're actually getting to the other side's like just like dream state, like we're going to be in a society completely opposite of our views, and they're both saying that. So it's like it can't actually both be the case,
Right?
So
Like,
I mean, the idea
like
here
Anark,
being it's
like to Anark, the Democrats are right wing.
well, but my
No,
point here being is that like think about that, like people are viewing it from the perspective of like yes, the state is like creeping more into like how much you're expected to sort of give up as far as privacy or just like I guess like it depends on what area you're in, but some parents are upset about like like different cultural aspects. Let's say like it's like the trans stuff, or on the other side I suppose it would be like the trans stuff again, except for in reverse. But like stuff like that, right? Or I guess like just stuff between like men and women, like that could also be both sided. Like some people seeing like, oh well, Andrew Tate's becoming more popular, the others are like, oh look at modern women, right? So like on both sides you're seeing like people saying, oh well, look at the other side winning, like look at the other side having what they want, look at how bad things are for our side. Whereas a lot of this, I mean, maybe not every single little cultural issue, but just a lot of the overarching stuff is a result of the government, if anything, just becoming or causing a more, I guess, nightmarish situation for everybody without people actually realizing it. And then they just kind of do the thing where they blame their neighbors for it.
Yeah, exactly. But like you said, the American people are tired of women.
Yes.
Thank you.
Let's see. Okay.
Right-wingers who just acquiesce to everything that this rising fascist ascendancy desires. So I know I've focused on Natalie here, but it's mostly because Natalie is expressing something that a lot of other people are feeling. I think she summarizes herself pretty well in this chunk from Voting.
Psychiatrists have this distinction between two kinds of suicidal thinking. So there's intent, which is when you have a plan for how you're going to do it, and then they have to commit you because you're a danger to yourself. And then there's ideation, which is, you're not actually going to do it, but you just have that inner monologue that's constantly saying, I just want to die. There's no more joy for me left in this world. I just can't stand it anymore. So right-wing extremist discourse is a violent intent, whereas left-wing radical discourse often amounts to revolutionary
literally me for every
kind of
ContraPoints video.
An alternative to politics.
Bro, I mean, maybe Natalie really did become a woman, because everything that said my ContraPoints is putting me to sleep.
It's making me tune out automatically.
Personally, I would have to agree. I think there's a lot of leftists that really are stuck in ideation and not intent. They do a lot of posturing. They are sort of obsessed with the aesthetics of radicalism, not actual radicalism. And
yeah,
so
and this
when
is
you're a
actually
person
true.
who really wants to see things get done, and you're
saying it's actually true.
I mean, yeah, I was just saying like this is actually true. I mean, like revolutionary ideation is something that you see a lot in left-wing communities. And if you want my honest opinion, I think it's honestly just because a lot of them have mental problems, they have family issues, usually because they're LGBT or plus or whatever, or have some mental disorder. So like they retreat to these online communities that support and defend them, and then, which usually tend to be Marxist or left wing, and then they start living on Twitter, so online left communities, and, they're reading theory all day and not showering, much like Karl Marx actually did IRL. So they just become kind of fixated on the aesthetics of, revolution being right around the corner, because it's literally just a cope for their terrible mental state. Because if revolution isn't around the corner, then they feel hopeless, So, like Anark said, I think it really is a good thing that he's encouraging leftists to, go touch grass and, make friendships and build communities in the real world. And I think it's something that community definitely needs at this moment.
Yeah. Let's see. We have Jack saying, I find it funny, bro, is so concerned about bottom up movements, but probably hates nationalism when culture is inherently a bottom up creation. I mean, I wouldn't say nationalism and culture are identical. I think they're easily
Yeah.
separable. Even if you see in geographical areas, you see more of a shared value system, like depending on where you go. I mean, obviously not every individual, but overall, you could say in general, depending on where you go, it's like, okay, sure, like that's influenced by like certain. I mean, if anything, like economics play a role in that. There are. I mean, I guess like just your economic condition makes it so that you're more capable of being. I mean, if anything, like having like rational values, just because like if you're in a state of like crisis or poverty, like it's going to be a lot harder, and I mean like severe poverty to the point of like, you have to fight for your food, not just like it's hard to afford things, but you're going to be at the point where there's not going to be a lot of room to establish proper values. You're not going to like, it's basically Maslow's hierarchy, where you're seeing that people have to focus on survival rather than any sort of like self-actualization or esteem or anything like that. And the idea here being that like that plays a role in a lot of how people are. So obviously, like if you look at a place like, I mean, I guess like Haiti, for example, then you'll understand why this is the case. It's like, okay, well, how could people act like that? Well, it's not just because they're Haitian, as much as you want to believe that, but it's
Yeah.
it's because of the conditions. And I mean, even so, like that can influence you even when you're in a different state, just because of I guess just for other reasons having to do with your rationality, your understanding and such. But the point here being is that, I mean, a lot of the times you'll sort of like develop culture through that, like through your environment. And I mean, if anything, it's how you interact with other people, and that a lot of that's based on economics. So the idea here being is that like, a bottom up creation, I don't necessarily know that I'd call culture that, though you could have cultural movements which are a result of influencers and such, but even so I don't necessarily know that I'd call that bottom up either. So I don't know, I don't really think so. But he says, well, at least a strong culture is bottom up, a weak culture is top down, but still
Weak culture.
okay.
I mean, the other thing too is that like culture itself is oftentimes created and a result of the state's economic norms on property and the arrangements that the state creates in society.
You're just stealing my point.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. But I just wanted. I think I just wanted to rephrase it in different ways.
No, it's fine.
Really
Go ahead. I was just calling you out there. I was like, well, you made it sound like you were going to say something else instead of rephrasing it. But yeah, go ahead.
But like, I mean, I guess just to give like an example, like if you're talking about like Black communities in the in the inner city, I mean it's a product of the state being aggressive. I'll just say that. So and again, like also like, oh well weak culture is top down, but like strong culture is bottom up. Like first of all, like what are you defining as strong or weak culture? But if we're gonna guess, like you're gonna go back to like the tradcath shit in like the maybe 16th century or some shit, like you don't think that was prescribed top down?
I mean, I
that
think
was a condition of other factors that cause people to become religious or etc.
I suppose in the sense of defining like weak and strong culture here would be that strong, not easily dissolvable, something that is, I guess, like something rational, something that would keep people well, I don't know about the rational part necessarily, depending on his definition, but something that keeps people together, something that unifies, something that is good for community, something that gives overall societal benefit, with weak culture being the opposite of that.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a pretty decent definition of what you could define those as. I don't know that you'd necessarily relate that to whether it's top down or bottom up, but I mean, I see that in the sense of like, okay, well, if you do want shared values that are lasting, sustaining, understandable, yeah, it makes sense that this would be something that people come to through rationality as opposed to having it enforced on them. If you have a very deontological sort of like, this is just your duty to do, yeah, it's going to cause people sort of I guess, a feeling that they're not necessarily doing something for a purpose or a meaning.
Right. Yeah, I didn't have anything more to say.
We're sort of surrounded by these leftists who really only seem to care about the aesthetics of radicalism and are stuck in what you might call revolutionary ideation, then it's easy to kind of dismiss the seriousness of what's taking place. But I just want to emphasize that you probably wouldn't have made the same argument in the early 1900s. And that's because something happened in the interim, in between the strength of the early 1900s, which led to the progressive era and a lot of the social democratic gains that were found throughout Europe. We saw the destruction of the revolutionary left. I don't think I need to belabor the history here. Most people are aware that there were two Red Scares, one taking place in the very early 1900s and another one just around the time of World War II. And these were devastating to the revolutionary left in the United States. In the interim, we have not actually built up the revolutionary constituency that we lost. It's my opinion that from about the 60s to the early 2000s, we were largely engaged in revolutionary ideation and not intent in the United States. And this is something I've been facing myself, both as an organizer and as a theorist and as somebody who just observes history. And you'll see that in my work, I actually talk about this phenomena. In fact, I actually did a video called Aesthetics as Radicalism, kind of addressing this very thing. In fact, Murray Bookchin talks about this tendency. He calls it lifestyleism, this sort of focus on having a radical lifestyle, on the aesthetics of radicalism, but not actually doing anything that builds a revolutionary constituency in a larger sense. So I totally
and I really like that
how you
term, lifestyleism.
Mhm.
I think honestly, Bookchin, the more I read about him, honestly, the more based I find him. He has some weird takes about scarcity, but I would say that overall he has a lot of really interesting points worth looking into. The same for David Graeber. I think like a lot of people within Austrian circles tend to dismiss people like, you know, Graeber, Bookchin, or even Kevin Carson for kind of their shit econ. But weirdly enough, a lot of them do come to economic conclusions and make economic arguments that could actually fit quite well in an Austrian framework. A really good example would be Graeber's concept of bullshit jobs. Basically, the idea here is that these large companies, there are just so many different jobs that are literally just they're paying you to do something, but it's basically just doing something useless at the firm, like or doing something that like kind of just goes around in a circle. Like you do something that you know, gets done by another manager, and then that thing kind of gets undone, right? Because the actual structure of the firm is like so centralized that it can often have calculation issues, and so he doesn't like cite Mises or the ECP, but this is a phenomenon that Mises and Hayek have both expanded upon, where you see these large firms, because they're insulated from competition and internal price signals due to their massive size, they often do a pretty shit job at calculating and can often lead to the creation of jobs which don't actually reflect any kind of, you know, market demand. So, and in the book, he gives a lot of examples where it's literally just a guy sitting at a desk and playing solitaire for 8 hours. That's his job. You know?
Yeah, I mean, I see a lot about people saying like, even, you know, saying like, well, I go into work, but I don't even work like a lot of the day. Like I'm just on Reddit.
Right, exactly. Like you're just on Twitter the whole time.
Yeah. So were there any other like timestamps specifically, or did you just want to write out part of it?
Honestly, that was all that point that I had about recommending more of Bookchin and Graeber. That was it.
Okay.
As far as my notes. So we can just end it here, or we can continue if you want.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly, that was all I had as far as notes as well.
Cool.
Yeah,
we can check the chat and then wrap it up.
Yeah. I know you wanted to talk some more, just, I mean, in general, like we could talk more about it in the future as far as like communism. So the video you sent me had to do with Marxism, right? It was like, cause I watched this one. I gotta be honest, I didn't watch the other one all the way through. But it was about,
it was a second thought video.
Yeah, it says a future beyond capitalism, socialism explained, correcting the medium, Marxism explained.
Yeah, it's basically just one of those videos that sort of just kind of is like a very basic intro to Marxism. And I know there are like a million different ones, but I thought Second Thought would be good because he points out a lot of very interesting things that are wrong, but that we could probably have a lot to say on, similar to this video. So I figure we could just make that a whole other stream, because I already made a whole bunch of notes for that for later.
Yeah, I think we should figure out a day for that. We could probably do that later. I'm just trying to think of when would be good. I'll have to let you know on that, but yeah.
We come next week, maybe even.
Yeah. I have, well, let me see. I think, are you usually good on Sundays or no?
Yeah, but it would probably have to be a little earlier.
Okay. We might,
this would be fine. Like, cause I go to bed usually around like 8 or 9.
Yeah.
On my time. So.
Oh yeah, I see. Yeah. Yeah, we'll definitely have to talk more about it, just see when it's good for us. I might have some plans coming up, so that was just why I mentioned that. Let's see. Yeah, we just got a lot of Jack talking in the chat about stuff. He talked about earlier, like India, why he thought it was going to be anarchist, and then he was saying that India has a pretty strong culture / religious line, in my opinion, for modern world as they naturally industrialize and stabilize more and more. Why would they need a state when they already have pretty powerful and strong cultural institutions? They don't need a state to hold up the caste system. They don't need a president / Congress. They can easily function without one. See, the thing is, I don't see why the case that
they have a strong religion, but it's the religion of poop.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it is a lot of cow shit is involved in that religion. I'm just going based
they
on
might have a caste system, but they need a plumbing system, I'll tell you.
Yeah, that was good. Okay. I was hearing that apparently, they have this thing where like it was they started trying to I don't know who was trying to introduce this. I don't know if it was like the government or what, but they were trying to introduce like toilets, like actual a plumbing system for real. And then the Indians were apparently like scared because they said there were like such a thing as toilet witches, but toilet witches actually really weren't even an occurrence in culture up until that point. So they actually made up toilet witches to not have to go to the bathroom properly.
Bruh.
So, I mean, there you go. You have, that's your strong culture for you. But I'll tell you what, that pavement's strong with being able to help, keep all that on it. But, really here, like my point was going to be like, you have a lot of ANCAP saying like,
wait, I did want to make a point of that real quick, is that I have a friend who's named Vince. He's in one of the servers I'm in, and he was apparently he has this coworker who's who's Indian, and he was like trying to explain some like economic thing to her, and he was like gonna use like a plumber analogy with his but he was thinking in his head for a second, oh wait, I probably shouldn't use that, because he thought subconsciously that like Indians wouldn't understand what a plumber was. And then he started like hysterically laughing on the call, realizing.
Okay. I was just gonna say Jack's point about India having a strong culture and therefore supposedly not needing a government, or like supposedly that would be the way that the government goes because they don't need the government, and then they don't see a point in it, and then the government dissolves because of that. I mean, this is a very like, I've heard this from ANCAPs too, when they talk about like, well, when the people realize that the government actually isn't necessary to engage in voluntary transactions, they'll vote it out, and they'll make sure it's disassembled by voting it, like making it like politically,
or even worse,
thing.
It'll just happen.
So like the point here is that like based on that, they try and say like this is how the anarchism will even come about, but the problem being that like it's not the idea that the government just becomes unnecessary or people don't see it as necessary or something that makes it go away. Like the government was never really even necessary in the first place, but it imposed itself due to basically just wanting to, I mean, like the whole point of the system is to control people. The whole point of the system is to extract money. I mean, I guess if anything, like place this single currency and then keep extracting from people to keep them in, I mean, a lower economic state than they could be given the opportunity to just engage in market transactions. So that doesn't really give the state an incentive to dissolve, if people say like, well, like we have a really strong culture. If anything, I mean, like they would see it as the state would be able to propagandize people to the point where it seems like the state is what caused that. Like the state is what keeps that together. So like, let's say like, in like East Asia, I mean, that's the case, right? So like, if you were to see it as, well, actually the reason that there's such societal order, there's such a strong culture is because of the government, then, then the people are going to be like, well, it's a good thing that we have, this government. It's a good thing that so even if people were to turn on it, it's not like the government would go away, but I don't even see why this would cause people to turn on the government.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Let me see. Okay. Also, what's your guys' problem with India? I love India. Beautiful people, but extremely misunderstood in my opinion. If you were a woman, would India be a travel destination that you'd want to go to is just my question. Probably not. Honestly, I don't know how much content you've seen about Indian street food or like, what they do on the street or like, you know, what they do with
literally
cows,
make it on the street.
what they do with cows. Like, I mean, these people, like, I'm serious. Like it is literally ingrained in their culture that cow poop is like actually a good thing, like to touch and you know, put on themselves. And also that you know, like their feces are okay in the street. You know, and then you look at the food videos. I mean, I don't know if we played it on this channel specifically, but I've played it before somewhere and we've like taken a look at it. I mean, I guess just the health standards really aren't there as far as like people dipping their hands and stuff and all that. I would not want to eat street food there.
Bro, America may have goy slop, but India's got poop slop.
Yeah. Let's see.
I mean, yeah, and obviously, like, we're not saying it's like completely backward and great. Like, I'm sure there's a lot of great stuff in India.
Well, let's not go too far.
Probably
but
I mean, we're no civilization. I'm
not saying every person that lives there is just this like mindless animal or something like that. But I'm just saying a lot of these practices. A lot of these practices I just would not like to see normalized anywhere near me. so I just, you know, I would like to stay as far away as possible from that. And so let's see what we got here.
Look, if you can pass the Pindia challenge, I'll maybe consider it.
Oh, yeah, I know what you're talking about. It's you just like go on a map and like click a random place in India and see what you find. I did that and I found like a truck like flipped over and then like what was it, like was it a landfill or was it trash or what? Like I swear like it was that. But yeah,
I genuinely tried clicking on like a rural area so I could like not get into any of the cities. I still managed to land on like a dirt road with like a bunch of trash piled up to the side of a tree.
Yeah. Okay. So he says, you're right, though. Culture is influenced by economic conditions. However, once a culture is fully developed, then the culture supersedes the economic values, in my opinion. Well, I mean, like if everything were to just completely collapse, I mean, I don't see it as the culture just helping things from not going awry. And also, I was just going to point out here, he says, hey, it's how they worship. I respect all true religions, even if, well, what does true religion even mean other than the store at the mall? But even if I disagree with them, you know, so look, you asked what our problem was. I have standards for what's okay and what's not okay. And so, you know, if your religion involves, you know, feces, I just, you know, I don't see how that, you know, is something that I'm going to be okay with or respect equally to the people that are eating crackers and drinking wine. Okay. Those are not the same thing. So, I mean, honestly, you know, like that's a very like moral relativism, like perspective that I don't even know why I would have that position. That's kind of like cultures aren't really like equal as far as if you want to take like the sum of values that are generally practiced by people in a certain area, or I guess like, you know, I guess that's the best way of defining it. Those are not all equal in what they practice. I mean, there are just places in the world that there are backwards things that I don't think, I mean, like, of course, like I see what I, you know, do as normal because that's how I was raised. But I think you can look at it from another perspective of just, oh, this is subjectively what I find to be like good or bad, and say like, well, how like good is it for living that way? How good is this for people to be doing? And you can look at things and say, well, this thing is worse because of that, and this thing is better because of that. Like you can make judgments about it even outside of what has been normal to you your whole life.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So we have James saying, sorry, I had to go for a few minutes, was arguing with someone who thought larger corporate entities would emerge under a free market. Yeah, those monopolies, if only the government weren't in the way from stopping them from forming.
They literally just create natural monopoly theory. It's crazy.
Oh, of course, but with a strong culture, it's far easier to organize. He's talking about the whole cultural factors superseding economic. But with a strong culture, it's far easier to organize as a society and to remove unnecessary structures like the state.
Also, I did want to mention, like, if that is the view that they're holding, like, what is a monopoly to them at that point? Like, do we have any current monopolies in the U.S., for example? Because if we don't, then that would kind of have to be the case if you're going to argue that, well, the current structures that we have would actually grow larger and would be more centralized.
You know, the thing is as well, so he thinks there will actually be like something bigger than like Amazon or Disney. Like there will actually be more centralization in the market. Is what his take is. Yeah, that sounds so great to me that you know, that Jeff Bezos has even more money than I do. I really want that to be the case, guys.
Well, look, you can't complain about it because reasons.
So he's saying a true religion is a religion not based or a knockoff of another. Yeah, they're all not based.
Real.
That's what I view as another religion, well, true religion.
They're all cringe.
But so, like, I can just establish a true religion right now by saying like something that isn't just based off another religion. Like I can say that TV over there holds the power to life, and that anybody that takes that from me is sentenced to death automatically because of that. Is that true now?
Yeah,
you must now pray to the television over there.
That's my religion.
Yeah. But yeah, I don't know. James, based for arguing with somebody online. We're gonna all one day be on our deathbeds thinking about it and saying, I wish I spent more time arguing with people online.
Right.
That's what we'll learn at the end of the day.
Real.
Let's see. Okay, well, he's saying he doesn't think all cultures are equal, but I believe that's what he's saying, but I believe Western culture is far, far, far inferior compared to, let's say, India. Are you serious? Or African tribal cultures due to a continued cultural line. That's it? That's your standard? That is not a great standard. I'm sorry. That to compare like Western culture to those,
and also, like, what are you even defining as Western culture? That's pretty fucking broad.
Even just the broad definition of it, like I can't really think of something worse than India. I mean, like, I don't know. I can see your point maybe with the African tribal cultures if you're talking about like cohesion and like, I don't know, but what about, I mean, are you attributing like societal, like technological advancements to where they originated as far as like what culture they're a part of? Like, are you, practices day to day involving any sort of those innovations? Like, are you including those or are you not? Let's see. So no, the US does have monopolies, but the US isn't also a strong culture and is extremely weak.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree, but like, I think the point that I was making was that if we're going to hold to the position that, well, the current institutions that we have, the current corpos would just get larger, would that imply that what we have now isn't monopolies?
Yeah,
because if they're growing larger, then what would that make them? Because it seems like that would make them at first just larger versions of monopolies that we currently have.
Yeah. Anyway,
but I don't know. I guess I think
we've extended this discussion for long enough, I suppose. But yeah, I don't know. We accomplished our mission today. We got through the whole video, 35 minutes long. And it only took us a couple hours. So honestly, Anark, if you're watching this, I guess just let us know about our criticisms and what you maybe agreed or disagreed with, or if it changed your perspective at all. I don't know if you would, but we're down to talking to you with you, man. I mean, I don't know if you want to. Maybe we're fascists as well, and therefore, not worthy of your platforming. But whatever, man. No real hate, I guess. I'm not.
We do want to emphasize. Yeah, we do want to emphasize too that like we're not here to hate bash anyone, even if we're responding to someone. We're literally just like fucking two retards on the internet shilling our ideas. So it's like,
yeah.
I mean, yeah, like we're just sharing our perspective. And again, we're not even a lot of the points that you were making. We're not even really disagreeing with you on that. We're just honestly just trying to expand them and make them more coherent of criticisms of the political process that you're trying to criticize.
I mean, my biggest criticism.
We're agreeing with you.
My biggest criticism of your takes was that I found that part of what you were saying was undermining the point of what was the central point actually of your video, which was to not vote. I felt that some of the things that you were saying were actually just like, if anything, could be used to criticize that same view. So if anything, I would say like, it's just about coherency. It's about just, I mean, if anything, having a better understanding of the state to know how to actually do anything about it, controlling people's lives, how to actually be in a stateless society and reach a place in which everything's, I mean, things are voluntary between people. There's no, I mean, like aggression is minimized as much as you really can. If anything, a lot of that's not just going to be the state going away, but it's also going to be innovation, of course. But yeah, I don't know. If you'd like to consider more of what we said, I guess just let us know.
Yeah, for real. All right. Well, that was a great stream.
Yes, we have another Ahmed and Ancat classic. Another banger. Another banger.
This is a certified hood classic.
Okay, guys. We'll be seeing you in our next stream, I suppose. Yeah.
Where
Good
we
stream. Yeah, thank
debunk
you.
Marxism epic style.
See you guys. Civil
See ya.
offense is the key to winning. Thank you.